I become the Demon King in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326, A Superhero Who Loves America. On the high plains of Wyoming, a massive army marched westward along a state highway. Alatham commanded the Indian Ghost Riders, guarding both sides of the highway. Along the road, a long line of cars, SUVs, trucks, and buses stretched as far as the eye could see, loaded with Indian descendants from across America. This army, lacking baggage, relied entirely on looting towns along the way for supplies, recreating the bloody westward expansion of the Americans. They would detour through southern Idaho into Oregon, bordering the Pacific Ocean, and seize this and the industrial powerhouse of Washington State to the north as territory for the Indian Republic. Washington State, located in the northwestern United States and bordering the Pacific Ocean, boasts a large basin and a narrow coastal plain, a rarity in the West. It boasts highly developed forestry, animal husbandry, and agriculture, along with manufacturing and high-tech industries. The state not only hosts Boeing production lines, but also houses the headquarters of Microsoft and Amazon. Now, with the outbreak of the American Civil War, the Southwestern Confederacy and the Eastern Confederacy were locked in a stalemate along the Mississippi River. Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, located in the Northwest, had also formed the Northwestern Confederacy, seeking not hegemony but self-preservation and awaiting the ultimate victor. The arms dealers of the Southwestern Confederacy were intent on destroying the Jewish financial groups in the Northeast and then conquering the country, rather than steadily taking over all the states and counties. Federalism and centralization employed distinct strategies for conquering the world. Federalism simply eliminated the existing federal government, established a new one, and then had the states express their willingness to join the new confederacy, effectively completing the transition while retaining their autonomy. Centralization, on the other hand, required the elimination of local military and political groups and the complete consolidation of territory, a gradual and measured approach. America had no tradition of centralized power since the founding of the 13 states, and all presidents who attempted to consolidate power within the federal government met with mysterious deaths. Initially, it was a group of large planters, dissatisfied with the British government's ever-increasing taxes, who rebelled and broke free from the colonial yoke. Everyone was motivated by the desire for greater income and independence. Having finally shaken off the colonial yoke, who would want a new one? Naturally, they embraced freedom wherever it could, leading to a period in which the federal government, in its early years, struggled to collect even the necessary taxes. After being taught a lesson by Canadian militiamen burning down the White House, the planters finally agreed to contribute more to the government and military. Local governments within the American states had long since grown accustomed to the autonomy granted by the federal system, and those who sought to centralize power were the very real enemy of the war. Therefore, ending the American Civil War was simple: simply help one of the two most powerful factions, the Southwestern and Eastern, to annihilate the other. However, some, perhaps deliberately, failed to understand the core issue and instead targeted the Indians, a third force. A spaceship suddenly flew over the marching Indian group. It was the one Carol had brought back to Earth, serving as the base for her superhero team. Seeing the Civil War erupt, Carol and Calson were heartbroken and anxious. However, they chose neither side, as if that would tarnish their pure patriotism. Instead, they targeted the Indians who had jumped out to divide America. "Haha, they're here," Ericum, atop his towering horse, sneered. A second later, a burst of colorful light appeared before him. Carol reached out to grab Ericum. However, the young man on horseback suddenly exploded into a puff of white smoke. Another shadow clone. Shit, Carol could only punch the Indian spirits charging at her from both sides. While she had gained extraordinary abilities like light-speed flight, super strength, and extraordinary endurance, her perception was relatively average. Shadow clone ninjutsu, aside from the soul-like perception of Kato Dan, could not guarantee 100% discrimination. Carol, with her average perception, naturally couldn't tell. In fact, since her encounter with Ericum, Carol hadn't seen the young man's true form. Ericum, a true Indian hunter, always protected himself within a safe zone. Tisk, tisk, have these despicable Americans even shed their hypocritical mask now? Ericum's voice spread, and he commanded his undead knights to surround Carol and the American who had jumped from the spaceship. The ordinary Indian descendants in the group quickly left the state highway and hid far away in the wilderness. Carol and the other superheroes didn't pursue them. They knew they only needed to destroy Arakham's army of Indian undead to thwart the Indians' attempt to establish a nation and protect American interests. Since they're dead, they should stay in hell. Phil Coulson, wielding an alien energy gun that Carol had brought back from space, struck an Indian undead, blasting a large hole in its chest. The so-called honest man had become cold-blooded when it came to defending American interests. Haha, hell, Arakahm scoffed as if he'd heard the funniest joke in the world. The Indians slaughtered by Americans are going to hell, but how about you, a bunch of shameless bandits, go to heaven? Oh, I forgot, God was created by you, and he's a white ghost. Shut up. A white-faced, beardless swordsman, wielding a rapier, charged at an undead knight, stabbing him in the throat while roaring, "You barbaric Indians, you have no right to judge God." He seemed a devout Christian. As the swordsman fell back to the ground beneath him suddenly turned to quicksand, swallowing him whole. Damn it, Carol dodged and rushed over, punching the road, creating a deep crater that spread out over 10 meters. A puff of white smoke erupted from the crater, and Arakham's shadow clone was blasted apart, but a gaping hole remained in the chest of the devout Christian swordsman. The wound was charred black, with traces of electric light still lingering. With such devotion to Christ, why aren't you exterminating the pagan Jews? A sneering voice rang out from behind. Don't bother with him. Focus on destroying these undead knights, Coulson shouted. Carol then transformed into a flashing streak of colorful light, charging through the Indian undead legion. Her body was her ultimate weapon. At her super speed, the undead knights couldn't withstand the onslaught, and their numbers dwindled at a noticeable rate. Tisk tisk, after a century, Americans are slaughtering Indians again. A golden figure suddenly appeared. Chapter 327, America at War. Water style, great explosion, a figure radiating golden light shouted, and a massive wave over 10 meters high suddenly appeared in the wilderness of northwestern America, sweeping towards Carol and his companions. Hiding deep underground, Arakahm quickly recalled the nearby Indian Death Knights and created 3 shadow clones to break through the waves, standing tall above them. With the exception of Carol, Phil Coulson and his recruited swordsmen were all drowned by the waves. Carol, having soared into the air, swooped down and rescued her companions one by one. However, the surrounding area was flooded, and the superheroes without the ability to fly could not even find a foothold. Carol was forced to return the others to the spaceship. This man is fast and powerful. Don't reveal your true form, Arakahm warned the allies who came to help while Carol was rescuing them. Chieragaki was startled at this and immediately created numerous golden nine-tailed fox clones. Her main body entered the marsh first, then similarly hid deep underground. She had long been a contracted henchman for Lin Hao, and this time, she was ordered by her boss to help out. After Ryukyu's independence, due to its proximity to the Divine Spear sphere of influence, the United States, currently in a period of turmoil, was unable to maintain its military hegemony in the Western Pacific, effectively acquiescing to Ryukyu's independence. Now, the American Civil War was preoccupied with itself, and the Eastern Island nations were suffering even more. Even if Chieragaki, the guardian deity of the Ryukyu, temporarily left, no one dared to provoke the Ryukyu, as the islands were home to many Hyujian people. Chieragaki felt more than a sense of colleagueship with the young man, Arakahm, but also a sense of shared hatred for the Indians as a Ryukyuan. They were all peoples who had suffered from American oppression and should unite in resistance. I'll trap her with a formation. Chieragaki's clone spread out, running across the marsh. Carol's attack on the Indian spirits was interrupted by the arrival of Chieragaki. Now that the spirits had been retrieved, and she couldn't find Arakham's true form, the operation was a complete failure. Shit, this woman is a Ryukyu superhuman, the culprit behind Ryukyu independence. Coulson, who had been brought aboard the spaceship by Carol, punched the hull. Today's operation has failed. We'll just have to wait for the next opportunity, Carol said helplessly. Let's just arrest those Indians over there. A man who once belonged to SHIELD Swordsman Squadron pointed at the convoy fleeing in the distant wasteland and angrily said, I don't believe those damn Indian brats won't come out. Coulson was tempted. He was an agent, and he'd used any means necessary to achieve his mission before, but Carol was adamant. Don't forget we're superheroes, not criminals, Carol. who called herself the Cosmic Police, was using her love for America to convince herself to attack the Indian spirits. She absolutely could not tolerate using ordinary people to threaten her opponents. That was tantamount to being a villain. He's a superhero who represents justice. During this delay, 4 shadow clones, radiating golden light, rushed to surround a spaceship in 4 directions. 4 Crimson Yang formation, a surge of chakra erupted, and 6 red light films suddenly appeared, tightly encircling Carol's spaceship and those aboard. Oh no! We're trapped. Carol, having rescued another swordsman from the water, immediately soared into the sky and smashed her fist into the red light film above the 4 Crimson Yang formation. With a clang, the formation shook violently, as if on the verge of collapse. Aragaki Chi's shadow clones immediately increased their chakra output, struggling to maintain the 4 Crimson Yang formation. Hold on. I'll see if my dust release technique can take her out. One of Arakam's shadow clones took 2 steps forward, raised both hands, and a transparent ball of light suddenly appeared between the palms. The ball of light gradually expanded, shooting out a rectangular beam of light, hurtling towards Carol above. Carol, enveloped in a radiant glow, was punching the 4 red sun formation's light barrier when, suddenly alerted, he blasted his left fist with an even more powerful beam of light. He swung it to the side and rear, also sending out a beam of light. The 2 beams collided in midair, their intersection erupting into a dazzling ball of light like a small sun before exploding and annihilating each other. No, her combat instincts are strong. Arakam's shadow clone retreated. Let me trap her here, while your main body leads the undead army westward. Acquire your objective first. Chi Aragaki diligently completed the task assigned by her boss. Alright, these shadow clones of mine will stay here and help you. Arakam didn't hesitate. His main body, hidden deep underground, immediately set off westward. Having realized from this attack that the arrogant Carol disdained to attack ordinary Indians, he sent only 1 shadow clone to reunite the troops, retreating to the southern mountains first, and then rejoining the main body once Washington state was captured. Trapped within the 4 red Yang formation, Carol remained oblivious to Aldakam's departure and continued to bombard it with all her might. However, Chi Aragaki, aided by the 9 tails chakra, was not afraid of a prolonged battle. If it were Carol, possessing the dual star power of the comics, the 4 red Yang formation alone might not have been able to contain her. Even now, if she unleashed the same energy used to ignite the Kree Sun in Captain Marvel 2, the small 4 red Yang formation would have been shattered. However, such power would have devastated the continental tectonic plates. This was America, and with her allies by her side, Carol clearly didn't dare unleash such a drastic move. The 2 sides were temporarily deadlocked in the wilderness of the Northwest. The fighting wasn't limited to the Northwest. Since the Southwestern Confederation officially declared war on the Eastern Confederation, American social order had been thrown into turmoil. State military and police could only barely secure key urban areas, such as state government offices, power plants, waterworks, and war reserve warehouses. Other areas, such as commercial districts and residential areas, were no longer able to be protected. Riots and crime have become the norm across America. The Mississippi River defenses, particularly those directly affected by the war, have long since descended into chaos. The fake captain, accompanied by Falcon, Sam Wilson, and Crossbones, Brock Rumlow, appeared in this war-torn region. They, too, chose no side, instead punishing criminals and rescuing civilians within the chaotic region. Unfortunately, with the onset of war, civilians victimized by crime were everywhere, and there was simply no way to save them all. The fake captain and Falcon could only numbly assist, sparing no one they could. Master Pierce, how long do I have to follow this guy? Crossbones lamented in frustration. Had Pierce's clone not urged him to stay with the fake captain, Crossbones would have quit long ago. They were currently in Memphis, east of the Mississippi River. Once a cargo hub, it served as a link between Central and Eastern America, boasting the world's second largest cargo airport. With the advent of war, it became a crucial battleground. Financial syndicates from the Northeast deployed heavy forces in the city, establishing a fortified defense. Southwestern arms dealers, eager to conquer this formidable position, similarly deployed heavy forces, even bringing in numerous alien weaponry salvaged from macro spacecraft. The battle for this strategic location raged for months, with no clear winner. Despite numerous changes of control, the stalemate persisted. The Jewish syndicates in the Northeast, seemingly aware of their fate, generously distributed their wealth to boost morale. The fighting was brutal, and the local residents suffered the most. Chapter 328, The Real and Fake Captains Meet. Shen Ran starts a rebellion. Memphis, a city reduced to a bloodbath, was largely abandoned by its inhabitants. However, some Americans, unwilling to abandon their possessions, chose to hold out. Soldiers from both sides of the Civil War showed no regard for those in the battle zone. Their artillery fire disregarded residential areas, raining down upon the enemy upon detection. Unable to endure the hardships of the war, residents fled one after another, leaving those who remained stubbornly stubborn. Captain, those who remain are indeed resilient, but they refuse to leave even after such a brutal battle. They're probably reluctant to leave their property. Can we convince them to join us? Johnny Blaze asked the real captain, Steve Rogers, scratching his head. The real captain also appeared on the battlefield, attempting to recruit the suffering Americans into his ranks. True to their clones, both the real and fake captain shared the same feelings for the American people, appearing wherever the suffering was greatest. Their methods and goals were entirely different. The fake captain was only interested in a temporary rescue, while the real captain, now reformed, wanted to lead them to create a brighter America. Tried to convince them to leave. They're coming, a member of the team responsible for clearing the way whispered to the rear, raising his rifle. On a dilapidated street corner, the fake captain, dressed in a striking uniform, appeared before the real captain and his group, accompanied by Sam Wilson, the Falcon, and Brock Rumlow, the Crossbones. Both sides were stunned. The fake captain smiled awkwardly. Long time no see. The real captain responded calmly, yes, it's been a while. The real captain still believed he came from another parallel universe and held no hostility towards the fake captain. Their beliefs simply differed. If the federal government still existed and the Civil War hadn't broken out, the fake captain, affiliated with the federal government, would have been grappling with whether to arrest the real captain, who is already a wanted criminal. Now, that dilemma was naturally over. Are you saving people too? The fake captain deliberately brought up the topic, masking his embarrassment. Yes, the real captain nodded. Falcon, standing behind the fake captain, tilted his head and asked Crossbones, did anything happen between them before? The awkward exchange gave Falcon goosebumps. Crossbones, knowing all the details, offered a playful smile. You want to know, really? Falcon shuddered, a chill running down his spine. Your smile gives me the feeling there's something unusual about their relationship, hey, Crossbones said, smiling without replying. A blood-related relationship, isn't that normal? Hey, stop spreading rumors about me, okay? The sharp-eyed fake captain overheard the conversation behind him, assuming it was just a joke between two close friends. With a sardonic scold, the atmosphere on the dilapidated street corner seemed to brighten. The fake captain continued, addressing the real captain, since we're saving people, do you want to come along? The real captain shook his head and said frankly, I want to take them away and convince them to join my team. The fake captain frowned slightly, knowing that his other-time counterpart hadn't given up on his original plan. The facts prove that the old America needs to change, the real captain interrupted, gesturing around. The ruins confirmed his point. Alright, the fake captain sighed, I'm not in a position to stop you. The two parted ways, one to the left, the other to the right. Just as the real and fake captains met, New York City's Hell's Kitchen welcomed its new owner. Shen Ran, having changed his identity, finally returned. He had no choice. The situation within SHIELD was turbulent, leaving him no room to start a rebellion in East Asia. He had no connections in Europe, and as for Africa and Australia, he hadn't even considered them. About 60 years ago, in the 1950s, Shen Ran's parents immigrated to America with him. He became a Chinese American, and thanks to his talent and intelligence, he joined SHIELD. It wasn't until that mission in 1968 that Shen Ran chose to start under a new identity. However, he lacked any sense of patriotism and was an extreme egoist, living solely for himself. Ever since receiving his superpowers from the Makaru, he had been intent on achieving great things. In the original comics, this man sought world domination, but the world was now too complex for his power. He had to settle for the next best thing, taking advantage of the American Civil War to seize territory. So he returned to the New York City he knew best. Honestly, although Shen Ran was portrayed as a warlord in Captain America, the Iron Nail, he lacked the aura of a warlord, resorting to the typical gang leader type villain tactics. Yes, a new Marvel comic from 2013 actually portrayed a Chinese-American villain as a Chinese warlord. Haha, I really don't know what the so-called fans are getting at. Boss, the gangs on this block have been completely wiped out. The former dorm manager seemed incredulous that the man before him, completely transformed, was actually the former boss Blue. Shen Ran, seated in a reclining chair, toyed with 2 balls, each containing 5 red stars. After listening to his men's report, Shen Ran touched a blue bead embedded in his chest with his free hand and said calmly, "Tell them everything they loot will be theirs." As he spoke, a beam of blue light emanated from the bead on his chest, binding 2 macro men within the beam, Makun and Yin. 2 monsters, roughly 10 meters tall, appeared over Hell's Kitchen, roaring deafeningly. Their eyes were bloodshot, clearly losing their minds. "Follow them, and take over this city," Shen Ran waved his hand. The gang members gathered on the street were immediately surprised and followed the 2 macro men, clutching a variety of weapons and shouting in disbelief. While the macro men appeared weak against the SHIE, that was because this universe's SHIE was highly skilled. In reality, these cosmic locusts were individually quite powerful. A single Fantastic Dragon alone had repeatedly rendered Iron Man and the Fantastic Four helpless. With 2 monsters helping them, wreaking havoc on New York City was easy. The Northeastern Financial Consortium, heavily mobilizing its forces on the front lines, was momentarily at a loss as to what to do in the face of the sudden appearance of these extraordinary creatures. New York City was plunged into chaos. The macro flying in the sky advanced towards the temporary federal headquarters in the suburbs, but the gangs on the ground had already lost their formation and engaged in looting and burning. The villain who once sought world domination, now intent on territorial dominance, had chosen to use a group of unorganized and undisciplined thugs to achieve his goals. I wonder if this guy ever received proper political and history lessons back home. Chapter 329, New York in 2012. There are quite a few visitors from different time and space. While Shen Ran was busy conquering New York, Lin Hao wasn't idle either. He gathered the Whitebearded Ancient One, Odin, the God King of Asgard, and Loki, the key figure in the next plan. "Father, can I not go?" Loki said with a bitter face, as if on the verge of tears. "Your fate, the fate of our family, and even the fate of all Asgard has indeed changed." Odin sighed softly, looking at his adopted son, and asked, "But how do you plan to experience your life? Thor has been reborn and found his own path. What about you?" Loki was silent, and ultimately chose to accept this mission. "Can you stop looking like you're about to be executed?" Lin Hao approached, soothing him. "You've mastered inner strength, chakra, and even spiritual power. Even if Kang, the Conqueror, comes, you can hold out until I get there. Remember, follow the procedure first. Try not to expose your other abilities. Once you reach the room at the end of time, immediately use the equipment at the Time Variance Administration to open the passage." "Okay." Loki took a deep breath and nodded solemnly. "I've signed a contract with the boss. In the event of an emergency, I hope the boss can bring my soul back. Don't worry about that. Not even eternity can affect my control over the contract," Lin Hao assured him calmly. After the group was ready, Lin Hao, acting as the administrator, lifted the blockade of the base universe. Whitebeard Ancient One waved his hand, drawing a circle, and a golden red circle appeared before them. Across from them lay an empty apartment in New York City, but it was the Earth 10086 universe that Lin Hao had created using his editing privileges and the power of his magic brush to replace the base universe. After the Li Dai Tao Jiang incident, the base universe slipped out of the control of the Marvel Universe. Lin Hao's creation filled the gap, becoming the default Earth 10086 universe used by Marvel's editorial department. Due to this loss of control, the flow of time between the 2 universes diverged slightly. While the base universe was still mid-2011, the time in Earth 10086 had advanced to May 2012, during the events of the Avengers, with a Chitauri invading New York. The people in the apartment could clearly hear explosions and screams outside. The moment they emerged from the golden red aura, Lin Hao concealed the secrets of the 4 people, lest they be discovered by the Ancient One, the Old Nun of this universe, or even by higher dimensional beings. This Earth 10086 universe was created by Lin Hao alone. He was its creator god. Lin Hao's understanding of this universe surpassed even that of the base universe, making his manipulation of divine secrets even more adept. Shortly after the 4 of them appeared, 4 more visitors from another time and space appeared in a Manhattan alley. They were none other than Captain America Steve Rogers, Iron Man Tony Stark, Ant-Man Scott Lang, and Bruce Banner, now merged with the Hulk, from the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, Earth 199,999. Hailing from the year 2023 and Earth 199,999, they planned to travel to New York City in 2012 to retrieve the Time Stone, the Mind Stone, and the Space Stone simultaneously, returning to save half of all life wiped out by Thanos. Alright, we each have our mission. Steve Rogers, now 10 years older but still with the same perky hips, held his shield in hand. Gazing at the wormhole in the distant sky where aliens were constantly raining down, and decisively issued his order. 2 of the stones are uptown, and 1 is downtown. Keep a low profile and keep track of the time. Just then, the 2012 Hulk roared down from the sky, hurling a car into the Charter soldiers with both hands. After crushing them, he leaped onto the wreckage and trampled on it. Bruce Banner, watching the scene, looked down in embarrassment, covering his face with his hands. How about you smash something too? Just to get the feel of it, Steve soothed. I don't think it's necessary, but whatever. Banner casually tore off his black t-shirt, walked over to a motorcycle, gently picked it up, and tossed it away. He bared his teeth and claws, looking incredibly adorable. The 4 of them then separated. Bruce Banner leaped from the rooftops to the sanctuary of New York on Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village, seeking out the old nun, the Ancient One, and trying to convince her to lend him the Time Stone. Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, and Scott Lang headed to Stark Tower, the center of the battlefield, to quietly seize the Mind Stone and the Space Stone. Since the Marvel Cinematic Universe introduced the concept of a multiverse, relying solely on the characters of Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr., and Captain America, played by Chris Evans, has made it impossible to confirm whether one's current universe is Earth 199,999. It could also be one of the parallel universes introduced in Avengers 4. Since then, multiple film and television universes have appeared in Spider-Man 3, No Homecoming and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Deadpool and Wolverine even directly assigned several more universes through the Temporal Variance Authority. So, if you're lucky enough to travel to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and see the familiar Iron Man and Captain America, don't rush to assume this is Earth 199,999. You'll have to wait until 2012 to visit New York City and see if the 4 visitors from another time and space are there. Lin Hao hadn't known this until he visited the Marvel editorial office in the real world and discovered the composition of his own universe. He then discovered that his universe wasn't the main Earth 199,999 universe, but rather the resource universe where the protagonists in Avengers 4 sought to retrieve the Infinity Stones. With this crucial information, Lin Hao began a long-term plan. The 4 protagonists from Earth 199,999 were insignificant, but the 2012 universe would produce a crucial figure that would influence the Marvel multiverse, Loki. This was the only god who ultimately reached the end of time, transformed himself into the World Tree, and saved the Marvel multiverse. Loki, and the Time Variance Administration he implicated, would become crucial bargaining chips in Lin Hao's next plan. If Lin Hao hadn't created a universe to replace his original one, Loki from the base universe would have reached the end of time and taken that place. Now that Lin Hao had changed Loki's fate, the Great Demon King wanted to control the timeline for himself. Hence, today's trip. The moment the 4 visitors from another time and space appeared on the streets of New York, Lin Hao, who had released his senses, immediately noticed them. Let's go to Stark Tower and wait. Lin Hao moved the 4 people to the top floor of Stark Tower without thinking. When they arrived, it was just in time to play out a famous Marvel scene. Loki was held upside down by Hulk and slammed to the ground left and right. Hiss, Loki from the base universe gasped. He felt pain just by looking at it. His heart ached, his balls ached, everything ached. Fortunately, I don't have to go through this, Loki was thankful in his heart. But he saw the boss. Lin Hao turned around, looked up and down at his clean clothes, and there was a hint of dissatisfaction in his eyes. No, it's not. Loki felt disgusted, and the alarm bells were ringing. In the script, you arrive at the Time Variance Administration injured. What if you get discovered? Lin Hao said seriously. You don't want to be discovered the moment you walk in, do you? Whitebeard, Ancient One and Odin turned their heads away. I'm having a drink tonight, and I'm writing now. I'll finish it. Chapter 330 Loki embarks on a journey. Unable to bear the sight, Ancient One Whitebeard and God King Odin turned their heads. Lin Hao approached Loki, grabbed his legs, and began to pound him left and right. As he did so, he compared his form and strength to the Hulk next to him. Since the secret was hidden, the others were oblivious, unable to see even if they tried. Thinking of it this way, Loki from the base universe was much luckier than the one being pounded by the Hulk. After the Hulk finished pounding him, he uttered his famous line, "Weak God." Lin Hao didn't copy him, saving his younger brother some face. Just as Hulk turned, Lin Hao flung Loki away and then used his immobilization technique to restrain the Loki in the pit and pull him over. With the secret hidden, everything unfolded smoothly, leaving no trace. Loki from the base universe knew his mission began here. He would follow the storyline he had familiarized himself with countless times over the past year, heading to the castle at the end of time to find the survivor, Kang. To ensure Loki's safe completion of this mission, Lin Hao generously taught him internal martial arts techniques, ninjutsu, and even a copy of the Shushan cultivation method. He also used a demon contract to preserve Loki's soul as a precaution. After throwing Loki away, Lin Hao, Ancient One Whitebeard, and Odin waited quietly on the top floor of Stark Tower, watching as the other 2012 Avengers arrived and surrounded Loki. A few minutes later, Tony Stark from the 2023 Prime Universe quietly floated in through the window in a nanosuit. Hiding behind the screen, he glanced at Steve Rogers from 2012 and quipped into the communicator, "Mr. Rogers, I'm sorry to tell you, your uniform really doesn't suit your butt. Do you really have to stare?" Steve replied, "Tony, seriously," Tony added. At this moment, Scott Lang, now reduced to Ant-Man, joined the discussion. "Captain, I think you're very handsome." That's the classic American hipster Natasha Romanoff, in the room, approached, holding the Mind Scepter, and asked, "Who gets it? The commandos will be here soon," Steve said. Just then, the elevator doors opened, and Crossbones Brock Rumlow, accompanied by bald Agent Sis Will and a SHIELD commando, arrived to collect the spoils. Tony Stark from 2023 quickly ducked behind the screen and onto the sofa, right in front of Lin Hao and the others, completely oblivious to the presence behind him. The replaced Loki, though immobilized by a spell, maintained his focus. Having been dragged into cover by Lin Hao, he had spotted Odin, the other Tony Stark, and even the other Loki who had replaced him. His eyes were filled with shock and confusion. It was like someone on a bridge observing the scenery, while someone below was watching them. Neither of them noticed a boat on the river, its occupants watching everything. Who are these people? Wasn't today's situation caused by Thanos sending the Mind Stone to Earth to cause trouble? Why were there other people? Who were they? "Boss, what do we do with this Loki?" Loki saw Odin actually asking the young Asian man standing before him, as if seeking advice. "Are you kidding? Is this Odin? Is this the God King of Asgard? If you don't mind having another son, take him home to raise. Otherwise, I'll wipe him out," Lin Hao said coldly. He created everything in this universe. Lin Hao had a natural advantage over the people and things here, unconsciously taking on the attitude of a creator. It's like someone writing a sentence. If they want to change a single word, they can just do it. There are probably only a very few people in the world who would be saddened by the change of a single word on paper. However, to the frozen Loki, this was like a bolt from the blue. He tried to struggle, but it was useless. At this time, the Serpent Shield commandos packed the Mind Stone and the Tesseract into boxes and took away. "Who are they?" Scott Lang asked Tony Stark. "SHIELD, but actually they were from Hydra, though we didn't know that at the time," Tony replied. "Really?" Scott was incredulous. "They're obviously not good people. You might be small, but you're really noisy." Tony stared intently at the box containing the Mind Staff and the Tesseract. These were the key to their mission, the only way his teammates could rescue their loved ones. "I'll go down and coordinate the search and rescue efforts." Steve Rogers in 2012 covered his ears as he passed by the handcuffed Loki. Loki from the base universe was stunned for a moment, then remembered the script and quickly transformed into Captain America, speaking in a pretentious voice. "I'll go down and coordinate the search and rescue efforts." Loki, getting into character, grumbled to Thor beside him, "Come on, how can you not vomit?" Thor then produced a gag, stuffed it in Loki's mouth, and dragged him towards the elevator. Loki glanced at the corner of the room. Though he couldn't see, he knew his boss and father were watching him. He immediately gathered his composure and prepared for the impending challenge. As they left the top floor, Ant-Man Scott Lang rushed toward 2012 Tony Stark, hiding on his clothes. Tony was clutching the case containing the Tesseract. Tony from 2023 leaped from the broken window, his entire body covered in nano-armor. Once everyone had entered the elevator, Hulk tried to join him, but was naturally denied entry, so he resorted to jumping down the stairs. The music ended, and the crowd dispersed. The room was deserted, leaving only Lin Hao, Ancient One, Odin, and this universe's Loki. "Boss, I've thought about it, and I still want to take him back. Frigga wouldn't want me to sit by and watch Loki be erased." Lin Hao turned and glanced at Odin, saying nonchalantly, "Whatever, after all, this Loki was Lin Hao's creation, his fate rested on his whim. Bringing him back to his base universe wasn't a big deal, it was better to give his good employee a break." They followed the Hulk up the stairs and quickly descended to the first floor. Tony Stark, entering from outside the building, changed into his uniform and walked over. Just then, Ant-Man Scott Lang burrowed into 2012 Tony's chest and unplugged a cable from the reactor. 2012 Tony collapsed, flinging the box containing the Tesseract. 2023 Tony quickly leaned over to retrieve it. But just as he was about to leave, Hulk burst out from the stairwell and knocked him back, sending the box containing the Tesseract flying. The box was thrown free, and the Tesseract landed right at Loki's feet. Seeing everything go according to script, Lin Hao smiled with satisfaction. Loki from the base universe immediately picked up the Tesseract, used magic to open a wormhole, and slipped through. Everything was perfect. Lin Hao hadn't made any unnecessary adjustments, letting the plot unfold as he wished. Now we just have to wait for him to succeed. Lin Hao didn't need Loki to complete the plot of Rocky Season 2, he only needed to use the Time Variance Administration equipment to open the space portal when he saw the survivor Kang at the end of Season 1 to complete the mission. The plot of Rocky Season 2 was actually a plot by the survivor Kang, to have Loki destroy the sacred timeline and restore the Kang dynasty. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331 The Arrival of the Multiverse. Loki Season 1 premiered. Many Marvel fans couldn't accept the Temporal Variance Authority's impressive design, offering specious excuses and claiming the Infinity Stones in the drawer weren't actually Infinity Stones, but rather a collection of gag props. However, after Loki Season 2 concluded, they finally accepted the Temporal Variance Authority's existence above the multiverse, a truly impressive feat. Loki's self-sacrifice not only saved the Marvel multiverse but also saved Marvel Studios' future creative plans. Loki Season 2 demonstrated to the world that Marvel still has the capacity to produce excellent series. In this year's Deadpool and Wolverine, the Temporal Variance Authority loomed large throughout, a powerful institution capable of controlling the multiverse and deciding whether a universe is restarted or destroyed. This organization possesses the technology to connect a multiverse at will. Its pale yellow phantom light portal can open a passage to any spacetime, surpassing Kamartaj's teleportation ring. While Kamartaj's magic cannot reach the location of the Time Variance Administration, this phantom light portal can. Therefore, Lin Hao seeks control of this organization. It will be of great benefit in his next multiverse conquest. Cracking the Time Variance Administration's technology, then redesigning and manufacturing a device capable of connecting the multiverse, will prevent the future failure of Kamartaj's teleportation ring. Mobility is crucial in war. Time in the Time Variance Administration doesn't flow, meaning that no matter how long Loki spends there, he can choose the next moment in this universe to open the pale yellow phantom light portal. Sure enough, the moment Loki departed, a light portal appeared before Lin Hao. With a wave of his hand, those around him, previously panicked by the portal's sudden appearance, lost all memory of it. Lin Hao, accompanied by Ancient One and Odin, with Odin carrying another Loki, stepped inside. This is a ruined castle at the end of time. One of Kang's benevolent forms, the survivor, sits here, maintaining the sacred timeline for countless years. Kang had anticipated the appearance of Loki and Sylvie, he had foreseen countless future developments, so he wasn't surprised. Kang was about to engage in a conversation, trying to deceive Loki while also provoking Sylvie to attack him and initiate his plan. Suddenly, Loki, who had appeared perfectly normal throughout, suddenly pulled out the Time Variance Management Bureau's controller and opened a portal of light. Why would you? Lin Hao stepped in first, maintaining his vigilance. Although the survivor Kang didn't demonstrate any combat prowess in the final episode of Loki Season 1, as the supervillain of Avengers 5, he deserved corresponding caution. You want to ask why I kept a peace, seeing his boss and his father arrive? Loki, who had experienced a turbulent but not unconventional experience, felt completely relieved and began to boast. He pulled another small scroll from his pocket, formed a seal, and shouted, "Unlock!" The scroll grew larger, a puff of white smoke erupted, and several more controllers fell out. "Hey, I've got more than one hidden." Loki, what the hell are you doing? Sylvie, standing beside him, seemed to suddenly not recognize this lover with whom she'd been through so much. She was particularly wary of Lin Hao's sudden appearance, only glancing at Odin for a moment. Sylvie was Loki from another universe, a female Loki, Odin's adopted daughter. "Don't be afraid, our reinforcements are here." Undeterred, Loki hid behind Lin Hao, casting a smug look at the survivor, Kang. "Old man, if you have the guts, talk to my boss." Kang studied the young Asian man before him, a look of disbelief on his face. He'd seen countless futures and countless timelines, and no Asian person in them could be this handsome, much less this powerful. Asians in the Marvel Universe were almost always villains, and the few who were normal were unsightly. Their power was mostly below average, purely for show. So, Lin Hao's sudden appearance here caught Kang off guard. He hadn't even seen the young Asian man's past or future. This was unrealistic. Lin Hao was also sizing Kang up, his mind devoid of extraneous thoughts, simply considering whether to keep this guy around or kill him with a single blow. According to Marvel's future plans, the multiverse will inevitably open, and new universes will even be added continuously. This would inevitably lead to the destruction of the confined sacred timeline. Loki's remodeled world tree would be more in line with Marvel's future plans. The sacred timeline is compact, uniting countless universes into one, while the world tree expands and grows, allowing new universes to continuously emerge. Thinking of this, Lin Hao turned to Sylvie and said, "Go ahead, kill him. You tell me to kill, and I'll kill." As expected of the female Loki, she wasn't used to being told what to do. "Hurry up, and don't offend the boss." Loki hurried over and whispered, "The boss is narrow-minded." Odin openly withdrew the Spear of Eternity. "Poor kid, how could you say that to the boss?" Sylvie pondered, while Kang, the survivor, stared intently at Lin Hao, but in reality, he was already making subtle moves, attempting to contact the Kangs of other universes. Kang's dynasty is a union of Kangs from different universes, each essentially claiming to be a conqueror, determined to conquer their own universe and any other universes they could find. Therefore, Avengers: Reign of Kang is a sequel to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, poised to fully launch the Multiverse War. This will provide Marvel with more themes to pursue. Now that 21st Century Fox and Marvel Studios have been acquired by Disney, the copyrights for most of the standalone titles have been consolidated, making it a perfect opportunity for editors to drastically alter scripts, allowing them to easily combine the stories of any number of superheroes and generate revenue. How could this not create a multiverse? Kang, the survivor, seemingly safeguarded the sacred timeline, preventing the alliance between Kangs from different universes and averting a multiverse war. In reality, this was still Kang's plan. His death by Sivir was also part of the plan, intended to usher in the plot of Loki Season 2 and establish an expansive multiverse. Coincidentally, Lin Hao's next move also focused on the multiverse. A two-way race, indeed. "Don't bother, your message won't get through." Lin Hao glanced at Kang. Survivor Kang frowned deeply, completely unable to fathom Lin Hao. "Who are you, anyway?" Lin Hao didn't bother to answer, tilting his head. "Loki, if you don't want your new companion to leave you, you'd better hurry her up. You should understand, I don't keep useless people here." Loki shuddered, and immediately urged Sylvie. "Don't you hate that nigger?" Hurry, Sylvie, though a bit rebellious, was no fool. She could sense Loki's fear of Lin Hao, not to mention that even his adoptive father, Odin, acted like a subordinate. Without hesitation, she stabbed him. Chapter 332 Another Iron Man and Captain America. After Kang's death, the sacred timeline outside the ruined castle began to spread and branch out. Humanity's current understanding of time is so limited that most theories are purely speculative. With no consensus, numerous works of art are filled with divergent concepts. DC and Marvel, longtime rivals, have completely different concepts regarding parallel universes and the multiverse, and they often despise and mock each other. In Avengers Endgame, Marvel introduced the concept of the past. You change isn't your past, but your future, transforming time travel into space travel, simply arriving at a past point in another parallel universe. DC immediately parroted this concept through Batman in The Flash, the Flashpoint paradox, describing the multiverse as a ball of spaghetti contaminated by ketchup. Any alteration to time, like a drop of sauce, contaminates the surrounding universes. Later, Marvel retaliated in Loki Season 2, turning those affected by the temporal disruption into noodles. Don't you like noodles? Then I'll turn everyone into dancing noodles, and see if you'll eat them. Lin Hao also had little understanding of time. The power of time he possessed came from his time baggage, a crude, simple, linear representation. Loki, go back and gather the employees of the Time Variance Administration and control their movements. After giving the order, Lin Hao didn't leave. Instead, he walked step by step into the void outside the castle, experiencing the chaotic timelines firsthand. Loki's ability to control and influence these timelines stemmed from centuries of study, ultimately sacrificing himself to take that position. Now that Loki was his henchman, and his family's fate had been altered by Lin Hao, he no longer had the self-sacrifice in mind, making it almost impossible for him to evolve the world tree. Lin Hao had no choice but to learn on his own, then manipulate a pre-prepared clone of Loki to take that position, controlling the chaotic timelines and evolving the world tree. This was the key to the origin and demise of the multiverse, so of course, he had to control it himself. The base universe is currently in hiding, destined to collide with the real-world Marvel editorial departments sooner or later. Seizing this crucial position before the higher dimensional beings become aware is a good opportunity. Lin Hao began studying and deducing. In the Time Variance Administration, time doesn't flow, or rather, time doesn't appear to flow in this area. The employees who have worked there for countless years never change their appearance, effectively achieving a form of immortality. Perhaps Survivor King is also worried that these random, ordinary people might acquire a terrifying reservoir of knowledge accumulated over countless years, so he specifically mandated regular memory resets for the employees. This immobility of time provides Lin Hao with convenient learning opportunities. No matter how long he stays here, time never skips a single second. Cultivation transcends time, and Lin Hao has no idea how much time he's spent, but as he gradually learns, he's gained a deeper understanding of the Marvel Universe's temporal settings. How long has it been? Lin Hao floated back from the void to the ruined castle. According to the flow of time, approximately 99 years have passed, perhaps due to his constant use of the Time Stone. Ancient One was particularly sensitive to time, and he managed to estimate the elapsed time through mental calculation. Not too long. Lin Hao smiled contentedly. Boss, are you sure? Odin asked hurriedly. After all, the boss had taken responsibility for his unworthy adopted son, and Odin was grateful. He didn't want to see Loki end up in a position destined for loneliness. Almost done, Lin Hao produced a pre-prepared clone of Loki, imbued it with his knowledge of time, enhanced its magical power, and finally signed a contract with it. After a series of operations, the clone stepped into the void, grasping the chaotic timelines with both hands. Magic surged, calming the turbulent hidden force of time. Finally, clutching a tangle of timelines in one hand, he sat on the golden throne, becoming the god who ruled over time in the multiverse. After he had organized the chaotic timelines, when viewed vertically, they resembled the world tree in Norse mythology. Lin Hao was brutally ruthless with the Time Variance Administration's ragtag crew. Anyone who chose to leave during the storyline had their memories erased and was sent back to their respective timelines. To avoid further complications, he would have stabbed every last one of them. As for the remaining operatives, Lin Hao contracted their souls, making them his lackeys, much like the fire Kirin at the farm. Everything is settled. Let's go. After 99 years of study and complete control of the Time Variance Administration, Lin Hao could now open a portal to the multiverse at any time and design a new controller for his personnel to use in future multiverse travel. Returning to Earth 10,086, time continued forward to the moment of departure. Chaos reigned in the first-floor lobby of Stark Tower. Thor placed Mjolnir on Iron Man Tony Stark's chest, resuscitating him with a gentle electric shock. Tony, from Earth 199,999, was knocked back by the Hulk. He stared at the shattered metal box and the vanished Tesseract, a bewildered look on his face. Loki's gone, Thor exclaimed. On the 14th floor, the two Steve Rogers engaged in a showdown of American hips. Loki's been spotted. On the 14th floor, after all, Steve, 10 years younger, was the more chiseled. If the Steve from Earth 199,999 hadn't distracted him with a promise that Bucky was still alive and then launched a surprise attack, he would have been met with a direct blow and killed. Having seized the Mind Scepter, Steve returned to the alleyway they'd agreed to meet, only to find Tony and Scott Lang looking defeated. "Sorry, we're in trouble," Tony said, clutching his head, where the Hulk had struck him. "One chance." "We've been told many times beforehand that we only have one chance," Scott shouted. 6 gems, not one less. "Think again, is there any other way?" Steve, taking the lead as captain, emphasized, "If we don't try, none of us will be able to get back." "Wait, there's another way to get the Tesseract and more PIM particles." Tony pushed open the door of the abandoned car and suggested, "Think carefully, a military facility in New Jersey." Steve suddenly realized, when were they together in that place? Tony replied, "They were probably there until SHIELD moved." "Where are you going?" Scott demanded. "Take the scepter and return to base first." Steve handed the Mind Staff to Scott. The two began to recalibrate their time and space coordinates. However, just as they were about to press the start button, time around them froze. Lin Hao, applying his knowledge on the spot, restored the technology used by the Temporal Variance Administration to pause time. A yellowish golden light gate opened, kicking Tony Stark and Steve Rogers from the main universe of Earth 199,999 in. Time resumed, and only Scott Lang was left. He thought his two teammates had already left for the next location, so he immediately activated the equipment and returned to the main universe of Earth 199,999. When Tony and Steve regained consciousness, they found themselves still on the streets of New York. Panicked crowds, collapsed buildings, and aliens flying in the sky. Chapter 333, Waterfuck. A civil war breaks out in America? "What's going on?" Steve Rogers exclaimed in astonishment. "The device isn't working." He looked down and saw it wasn't. His hand was still on the start button, unpressed. "Wait," just as Steve was about to press it, Tony Stark stopped him, pointing a finger at the two macro men in the air, his face filled with shock. Steve looked up and saw two green monsters, nearly 10 meters tall, spewing columns of fire towards the Empire State Building. The streets were filled with panicked New Yorkers. "Wow. What are these things?" Tony struggled to explain, as he didn't recognize them either. "Here," Steve hesitated. "Yes, this is clearly still New York," Tony continued, "but not the two New Yorks we've been to before. The device isn't working." Steve looked down at the device again and saw that the PIM particles were still half full. "So why are we here?" He was just a World War II veteran who barely made up 10 years of schooling. His understanding of science clearly didn't match that of Tony Stark, who held numerous doctorates. But even the brilliant scientist couldn't explain it. "The device isn't working. It's not a malfunction that's brought us to this alternate universe. Don't think about that for now." Steve forced himself to calm down and collect his thoughts. "This New York is clearly in serious trouble too, but we can complete our mission first. You record the coordinates, and once we're done with our own affairs, we can return to this time point and help New York solve its problems." This was Steve's idea. After all, they already had the technology to travel through space, so they could easily go back and solve the problems in their own universe before returning here. Even the righteous Steve chose this option, so the more selfish Tony naturally followed suit. Okay, but when they recalibrated the time and space coordinates and pressed the start button, there was no response. This time the device truly had failed. "What the hell?" Tony slapped his wrists twice, bewildered. He'd only used something he'd built once. It couldn't be this useless, could it? Steve followed suit and slapped his wrists twice. The two of them kept trying to press the start button, but still no response. Of course, they didn't know that Lin Hao, using his editing privileges and the power of his magic pen, had constructed a vast, cosmic formation covering the base universe, completely severing its connection with the Marvel multiverse. Although Tony Stark's time travel machine could connect to other parallel universes through the quantum realm, it couldn't break through Lin Hao's specially constructed formation. Without Lin Hao's authorization, those within the base universe couldn't leave, and those from other universes couldn't enter. "Looks like we're in real trouble," Tony said, his brow furrowed in a serious expression. "First, find a place to stay, figure out where this place is, and then figure out a solution, Steve said decisively. A veteran of the battlefield, he possessed a formidable will and wouldn't give up easily. Tony then put away his nanosuit, glanced at Steve's star-spangled uniform, and suggested, "Your outfit is too conspicuous. Let's cover it with a nanosuit and change the style." "You've set up other styles." Steve was astonished. "I just loaded some designs." Tony took Steve's wrist, manipulated his device, and transformed the nanosuit into a standard outfit. The macro people in the sky continued to wreak havoc, and gangs were looting everywhere on the streets of New York. Tony and Steve, from the main universe of Earth 199,999, remained calm, but they had already sensed something was amiss. "Why haven't the Avengers shown up? And neither have you from this universe?" Steve, looking at the two monsters wrecking the city in the distance, couldn't hide his confusion. Could it be before 2008? "There's a computer here." Tony found a street-side coffee shop and saw a computer with internet access, so he pushed the door open. The employees and customers had already fled. In fact, since the outbreak of the Civil War, fewer people were willing to go out for coffee. If this shop weren't located in downtown New York, it would have collapsed long ago. Tony took out his glasses, loaded with the Artificial Intelligence Friday, and placed them on the computer. A moment later, the AI Friday accessed the internet and displayed the information it found on the screen. The two people in front of the screen were stunned. Look what they saw. The American Civil War has broken out. The American Civil War has broken out. The American Civil War has broken out. Wow. Steve glanced at the bottom right corner of his computer screen, confirming the date was July 2011, not July 1861. What a joke. Is the world celebrating April Fool's Day? Tony, his face livid, quickly searched the news of the past year or two, quickly piecing together the unfolding events. A giant monster descended on Washington, and the top brass used nuclear weapons. A dead Indian reappeared, slaughtering Los Angeles residents, and the top brass used nuclear weapons again. The four southwestern states were forced to defend each other, forming the Southwest Alliance. Nick Fury lured aliens to Earth, and China united with other nations to defeat them, while America remained indifferent. The energy revolution and the formation of the Earth Civilization Alliance destroyed Wall Street finance. An alien spaceship crashed into America, and the four southwestern states officially provoked a civil war. Everything had a cause and effect, a clear and unambiguous sequence. Shit, Tony cursed after reading through it all. How did Earth get to this point? Watch out, Steve suddenly tackled Tony. It wasn't because he had any feelings for his nephew, but rather because a macro flew over, spewing a column of fire across the street. The cafe was in shambles, its computers destroyed. Seeing that no Avengers or superheroes had appeared to help, Tony pondered for a moment and made a decision. Friday, connect immediately and contact Jarvis, if he still exists in this universe. The Artificial Intelligence Friday began to carry out the command, quickly discovering Jarvis's presence online and initiating a call. Tony Stark of the base universe wasn't staying at his clifftop villa in Malibu, west of Los Angeles, or at Stark Tower in New York. Instead, he brought producer Man Happy and Pepper Potts directly to Hawaii in the Pacific. It was both a vacation and a refuge. There were countless wealthy Americans like him who deliberately fled the vortex of civil war. As Lin Hao had told the Skrulls on their ship, talent and capital from other countries immigrated to America to enjoy freedom, not to share in its hardships. When war broke out, everyone who could leave America did so, even the leaders of the 10 major corporations who were driving the war. Is that surprising? The noble bosses of the corporations. So noble, expected to share the honors and disgrace of the frontline soldiers? Fight when necessary, and afterward, the nobles would divide the spoils of victory. If the losers surrendered their property, the victors would grant them noble respect. This was the workings of aristocratic war. The defeated suffered only losses of power, wealth, and prestige. Their noble bloodline even granted them the privilege of insulting war heroes. If you were just a peasant soldier, even if you bravely fought and captured a noble commander amidst a vast army, you could not show the slightest disrespect, much less accept his surrender. Otherwise, the captured noble commander would have the right to demand that the victorious commander punish you. To maintain the privileges of all the nobles, the victorious commander generally offered him face. Even if a peasant soldier is dealt with, his military achievements erased, or even punished or killed, the other soldiers will not feel a sense of shared hatred for the enemy. They will simply acquiesce and accept that he has chosen his own fate. Serves you right. Who told you to provoke the nobles? The Western world has brainwashed ordinary people with the bloodline theory for thousands of years, and this perception has long been ingrained into their genes. It is always the nobles who give the orders, and the young men from the lower classes go to the battlefield. Chapter 334, What right do you outsiders have to blame us who endure humiliation? Base Universe retreated to Hawaii, not only to protect his family, but also to avoid having to choose a side. From the outset of the Southwestern Federation's uprising, they dispatched prominent figures to Malibu to persuade Tony to join them as a military equipment consultant. Similarly, the Eastern Federation repeatedly asked Pepper Potts of Stark Tower to convey Tony's intentions. As the inventor of the Iron Man suit, Tony Stark was undoubtedly a popular choice for both sides of the conflict. But he didn't want to choose. He was a patriot, and his love for America was his. While he knew the best way to end the Civil War was to help one side destroy the other, he refused to do so. Doing so would tarnish his pure patriotism. Moreover, if his chosen side lost, wouldn't he be condemned to shame? To avoid choosing a side, Tony Stark sought the seclusion of Hawaii. Inside a beachfront villa, Jarvis received a call from Friday and quickly reported to his master, "Sir, another AI system has bypassed my firewall and is communicating directly with me." Another one, Tony was astonished. From China, currently on Earth, besides him, perhaps only SHIE and the Chinese government behind it have the capability to develop a mature AI. "No, the IP shows it's from New York," Jarvis replied. "Besides, this system feels very familiar to me, its operation is very similar to mine." Friday was originally Tony Stark's next-generation AI, upgraded from Jarvis. After Jarvis was devoured by Ultron and ultimately materialized as the Vision, he completely perished. Tony had no choice but to rewrite a new program to replace it. When writing Friday, he certainly didn't completely abandon Jarvis's programming techniques and underlying logic, he simply updated and incorporated new ideas. It's difficult to completely discard something, just like two books written by the same author, the style is difficult to change. Hearing Jarvis' words, Tony ordered it, "Connect." A different Tony Stark's face suddenly appeared on the projected screen. Both of them were stunned. Tony in 2011 couldn't believe this was his alter ego. Tony in 2023 couldn't believe how this was his own self from 12 years ago, yet he looked so haggard and even older. Tony in 2023 didn't realize that Tony in 2011 only had Pepper Potts around to groom him daily. Otherwise, he'd have looked the same shabby, unkempt man with his beard and messy hair. Despite the failures and hardships of 5 years ago, Tony in 2023 has found comfort in the past few years, after marrying Pepper Potts and having a daughter, and seemingly looking younger. 2023 Tony suddenly sighed. "You don't look like you've had an easy time, let me guess." 2011 Tony studied him carefully, recalling what Jarvis had just said. "You're not a metahuman with the ability to transform?" "Yes, I came from another parallel universe, arriving via the quantum realm." At this, 2023 Tony frowned and suggested, "Can we go find you? I might need a little help." The camera zoomed out, and 2011 Tony noticed a Steve Rogers standing next to him. "Parallel universe, haha." 2011 Tony's emotions were mixed, even a hint of sarcasm. "You guys are here at the perfect time." When the two Captain Americas were revealed, Tony, who had hacked into the SHIELD network, had already learned of the existence of parallel universes and had developed many of his own ideas about the theory. However, he was busy upgrading his armor and dealing with Dongfang Bubei, so he hadn't delved into it. But since parallel universes exist, Tony has also considered asking his alternate self for help, especially when he's at his most vulnerable. Unfortunately, he's been unable to overcome the challenge, unable to find a way to open a space-time portal. Now that America is mired in civil war, his alternate self has appeared. "If you had come earlier, perhaps you could have helped build America's spaceship, and the Civil War wouldn't have even begun." Hence the 2011 Tony's words, tinged with resentment. Tony and Steve on the other side of the video were bewildered, but they desperately needed help. Their time shuttle had malfunctioned, and they desperately needed a way back. Besides, since this was also a parallel universe, perhaps they could find a way to obtain the Tesseract. Steve from 2023, still reminiscent of the New Yorkers who were suffering, added, "Why isn't anyone stopping these two monsters in the skies above New York? Haha, you're blaming us, knowing nothing." Tony from 2011 sneered. "Do you know who these two aliens are? Do you know what would happen to America if we act rashly?" You know nothing, so what right do you have to blame us? It was a beautiful misunderstanding that even Lin Hao hadn't noticed. Everyone on Earth knew that the Macro arrived on Earth in a mountain-sized spaceship. SHIE led warriors from various nations to defeat the alien invaders, and all the alien prisoners were naturally taken in by SHIE. However, they didn't know that other Macro arrived on Earth over 2,000 years earlier. So when Shenran summoned Makun and Nian to destroy New York, Earthlings naturally assumed this was a test from the new boss against America and the rest of the world. After all, the aliens had all been captured by SHIE, and now they were back in New York. It was hard not to draw parallels. As the New World boss, a hasty attack on America would be beneath his magnanimity and inconsistent with the peaceful strategy he's consistently promoted. So, he's sending 2 aliens to test the waters, gauge the public's reaction, and then decide whether to resort to military action. You see, the new boss still has some dignity. At least he's testing the waters first. Unlike the old boss, who, armed with a bag of laundry detergent, would find an excuse to launch a military attack against a disobedient nation. How considerate of him. I'm in tears. A wonderful misunderstanding ensued, and it's the reason Iron Man Tony Stark and Ms. Marvel Carol Danvers didn't rush to New York's aid. What if their actions to repel the 2 Macro spies provoked a full-scale attack from the enraged SHIE? With America's current strength, there's no way it could withstand a full-scale war. Let New York be destroyed. Anyway, Washington, Los Angeles, Houston, Phoenix, Memphis, and even Olympia, which was recently overrun by Indians, Seattle, Portland, and Beaverton, if you count them all, so many cities have been destroyed. New York is nothing. It's better than an all-out war. We locals endure humiliation and accommodate the Japanese for the sake of our country. Do you outsiders understand our painstaking efforts? Chapter 335, Local Tony is not very polite. Steve Rogers and Tony Stark from the Earth 199,999 universe simply couldn't comprehend the pain and struggles Tony in this universe was experiencing, nor could they understand why a civil war had broken out in the great nation of America. Now is not the right time to discuss this, Tony from 2023 said, knowing his own character, a man who easily yields to soft words and doesn't respond to harsh ones. He quickly lowered his composure and pleaded, Mr. Stark, we really need your help right now. In the past, the proud Tony Stark would never have said such words, but after marrying and having a daughter, Tony from 2023 had changed greatly, ultimately even willing to sacrifice himself to save the world. It's said that humans have 2 growth periods, one during development and the other after becoming parents. Only after having children can one understand responsibility and learn to shoulder it. Tony Stark in the cinematic universe also experienced this emotional journey. They were anxious to find the Space Stone and return to save their lives, but they unexpectedly arrived in this unfamiliar universe, and their time machine suddenly failed, leaving them at a loss. Finding the Space Stone's location required intelligence, uncovering the reason for its inexplicable appearance in this universe required intelligence, and investigating the malfunction of the time-space shuttle required equipment. For these 2 outsiders, seeking local help was the best way to resolve these problems quickly. Perhaps because the proud Tony's alter ego's surrender pleased him, or perhaps because he wanted to know how they traveled through the parallel universe, the Tony of this universe ultimately chose to help them. Go to the manor in the suburbs. There's a plane there. You should know where it is, the 2011 Tony warned. Don't fly south, that's a war zone. Follow the northern border to Alaska first. That's the route the military has authorized. The 2011 Tony's relationship with the U.S. military was undoubtedly much better than the 2023 Tony's. Following the original plan, the latter eliminated Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing division, transitioned to the energy sector, and controlled the manufacturing technology for the Iron Man suit. His ties with the military were no longer as close as they had been as an arms dealer. The former, however, is different. Due to America's recent misfortunes, the military has been forced to form the Iron Legion. As a technical advisor, Tony maintains close ties with the military. This Iron Legion has been divided among various factions within the United States. While the neutral states protect the personal safety of the powerful, the 2 sides in the Civil War, eager to achieve a decisive victory, have already deployed them to the battlefield since the beginning of the conflict. After months of fierce fighting, the iron armor suits of both sides have been largely destroyed, yet Tony refuses to provide repairs or system updates to either side. Parts can be manufactured based on matching, But maintaining the iron armor suit's proper function and effectiveness requires the assistance of artificial intelligence. The US military's AI comes entirely from Tony, and without his authorization, even if parts are manufactured and assembled from previous models, they cannot be flashed and activated. This is one of Tony and Stark Industries' self-preservation strategies, and a common practice in the US arms industry. Otherwise, what if the soldiers refuse to pay for the weapons and equipment once they have them? And what if the federal government attempts to seize their factories? Don't capitalists need a sense of security? Forced to do so, the warring factions reclaim their remaining armor, reserving it to protect the patriarchs and key military and political figures of the various conglomerates. After all, the world is dangerous these days, and the masters need extraordinary powers to protect them. Even as New York was under attack, the Jews who controlled the northeastern financial conglomerates never deployed their bodyguards. What did the deaths of a few small fry matter? The safety of the masters was crucial to international stability and world peace. After receiving guidance, Tony from 2023 took Steve to a mansion he had purchased outside New York. On the way out, Steve remained concerned about the two Makrats wreaking havoc in New York. Unfortunately, judging by their combat prowess, it's difficult for the two of us to defeat them unless we receive support from this universe. Even though Tony from 2023 was wearing the Blood Edge armor, he was still unable to deal with the two Makrats. Crucially, Steve couldn't fly, so he couldn't deliver the main attack. In the comics, Iron Man used a specially constructed anti-various dragon armor, a heavy-duty suit resembling a Gundam, to fight the two Makru. That's why Tony said he needed support from this universe to defeat the two Makru. At the very least, he needed the Tony of this universe to provide him with a heavy-duty suit. I have to know what's happening in this universe, a frustrated Steve determined. He'd never encountered anything like this before. There was an enemy wreaking havoc on American soil, yet America was allowed to slaughter its citizens. Neither the government nor the superheroes showed up. This was unacceptable to the deeply patriotic Steve, and he demanded answers. Steve from 2023 formed his first bond with this alien America. The deeper the connection, the more painful the wound. A certain unnamed demonic figure remarked, "If you're just a spectator, what's the point in destroying it?" Well, we're on our way to finding the answers. Tony and Steve arrived at the suburban estate and found a small plane in the hangar. It was small, but in fact, in addition to the crew seats, there were 5 or 6 exquisite soft seats. They had no crew now, but that didn't bother Tony from 2023. He entered the cockpit and allowed Friday, loaded into his glasses, to hack into the plane. After successfully activating it, he used artificial intelligence to control the takeoff. All of them had been modified by Tony Stark, sharing the same heritage. Tony from 2023 possessed far greater technological expertise than Tony from 2011. The two followed a flight path stored in the aircraft systems, flying north, then west, arriving in Las Vegas and heading towards Hawaii in the Pacific. After tossing and turning from noon to night, the hungry two finally landed at Tony's Hawaiian estate. When a man who looked exactly like him stepped off the plane, Tony from 2011 finally believed it was his alternate self. "Boss, this guy." The bodyguard happy glanced left and right, unable to detect a single difference. That's not accurate either. The 2011 Tony had suffered so much, he looked incredibly gaunt and worn. His poorly maintained figure, coupled with his alcoholism, made him appear even more greasy and decadent. "Oh my god, I almost thought I saw Thor." The 2023 Tony couldn't help but grumble. Thor. The 2011 Tony heard a hint of sarcasm in the other's words, and not wanting to be outdone, he immediately retorted, "Haha, you actually know the wanted alien who destroyed the White House." Chapter 336, Is Odin the mastermind behind America's suffering? Walter, X2 was bewildered. Thor? Destroy the White House? Why? Too much fake Earthlicker? It seems the history of this universe is quite different, Steve Rogers said gravely. Tony Stark from 2023 also realized this, but he still half-jokingly said, "Mr. Stark, could you please treat us to dinner?" Just then, Pepper Potts arrived upon hearing the news and, upon seeing the scene on the tarmac, covered her mouth with her hand in surprise. "Wow, Pepper, you look so young." Men's lust never fades. A 16-year-old boy and an 86-year-old have the same preferences. Especially for a playboy like Tony Stark. As European and American women age, their figures and looks plummet. Seeing Pepper from over a decade ago, Tony from 2023 couldn't help but be struck by a bright spot. Hey, kid, Tony from 2011 quickly blocked his view, like a lion guarding its prey. She's my Pepper, sorry, just a sentimental thought, Tony from 2023 smirked. You are, Pepper Potts approached, sizing them up with a look of disbelief. You guys are, they're from another parallel universe, Tony from 2011 replied with a scowl. Really? He's Tony Stark too, Pepper stared in surprise, then glanced sideways at her boyfriend. He looks even more attractive than you. For a while, Tony Stark had been drinking and falling into decadence. As his girlfriend, she not only had to manage his household but also had to frequently fly back to Malibu to babysit his drunks and cheer him up, enduring much humiliation. Sure enough, Pepper, no matter which universe, has such good taste, winning the favor of Pepper from another universe, proving himself superior to the Tony Stark from another universe, undoubtedly had a sweet spot for him. Steve, standing behind him, couldn't bear to watch. He quickly stepped forward and whispered, "Please restrain yourself. We've offended our own version of this universe, and we still expect them to help us." Tony from 2023 suddenly realized his mistake. He not only had to go back to save people, but he also had to go home to see his wife and daughter. He really couldn't be too extravagant. Ms. Pepper, Mr. Stark, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you in advance for the hospitality. Seeing the proud Tony Stark bow to him, Tony from 2011 felt a little better. Come in, dinner was naturally ready. Tony Stark wasn't one to be so stingy, and he was actually very interested in how to connect parallel universes. At the table, Tony and Steve from 2023 quickly grabbed some food and eagerly asked, why did the American Civil War break out? This was the question that concerned the two patriots the most. Other matters were not a big deal. After all, as long as they resolved their current problems, they could return to their scheduled time. This question proved too complex to explain, so Tony from 2011 ordered Jarvis, find out all the major events that have occurred in America over the past 3 years and show them to them. Jarvis' projection screen then began to depict what could be described as the most horrific 3 years in American history. San Francisco's black versus white wasn't even a factor. The first scene was the two emperors showdown atop the White House. Then Thor's hammer struck the White House. Then a giant octopus struck the White House. Why is it only the White House that's suffering? Tony and Steve from 2023 exclaimed in unison. Haha, it won't just be the White House from now on. Tony from 2011 chuckled wryly. Indeed, the suffering wasn't limited to Washington, it was spreading throughout America. For the past 3 years, America had been like a plague cursed by a plague god. Nothing good had happened. No wonder Thor is a wanted criminal. Tony from 2023 finally understood what Tony from 2011 had meant. But Thor's hammer should have landed in New Mexico. How did it hit the White House? A few years ago, at a cocktail party, Thor said his father had dropped Thor's hammer on Earth to test him. Steve recalled the scene from their party together in Avengers 2. Thor boasted that only he could lift Asgard's legendary hammer, Mjolnir. The others didn't believe him and tried various tricks to lift it, but Steve, playing it down, deliberately failed. So Steve remembered it clearly. Could it be that Thor's father missed the target? But Earth is so big, why did it hit the White House? What are you talking about? Tony from 2011 immediately pressed. Was that hammer dropped by Odin on Earth? When you don't know some information, it's like looking at a foggy, elusive mess. But once you get the key information, the answer becomes clear. The two from 2023 realized the problem, and their faces turned grim. This universe's Odin has ill intentions not just towards Earth, but towards America. How could this be possible? America is the beacon of civilization on Earth. The Asgardians speak English, so why would they harbor hostility towards America? Could it be that everything that's happened in America these past few years is Odin's fault? 2011 Tony immediately flashed an angry expression. Nick Fury had previously revealed the existence of the Asgardians, and the American elite were largely aware of their existence and had conducted research and analysis on them. Odin is the god king of Asgard, possessing immense individual power. He's capable of controlling that octopus monster, and Asgard is a formidable force in the universe. They could certainly influence the Makru. After some analysis, 2011 Tony suddenly realized that Odin's height, weight, and build perfectly matched the image of the mastermind behind the incident. Holy crap. So, all the hardship America has endured these past few years is the fault of that old man, Odin. But Odin's going to be dead in a few years. There's no reason for him to target America, right? The two from the future wondered. What? Tony from 2011 immediately started a conspiracy theory, his suspicions of Odin growing even stronger. Because he's dying, it's all the more important to eliminate the threat to his successor. Tony and Steve from 2023 remained silent. Recalling their memories of Thor's idiotic demeanor, he certainly didn't seem like a good heir to the throne. Could it be that this universe's Odin foresaw the outcome, Thor destroying Asgard and the survivors migrating to America, and so he's sabotaging Thor's impression of America? No way. So Odin's attitude towards America is so negative. All sorts of thoughts ran through Tony and Steve from 2023. They exchanged a glance and tacitly decided to conceal this new information from their own universe's Thor. After all, their Odin was dead, and Asgard had been destroyed by Thor. Letting the Asgardians remain on Earth, maintaining the status quo, was fine. Chapter 337. What? Thanos is unofficial on Earth? Regardless of which universe, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are undeniably patriots, loving America and proactively defending its interests. While they unexpectedly learned of Odin's truly awful treatment of America, their own Odin is dead, and it's unwise to subject the living to the suffering of a dead man, right? Surely, even if Odin were still alive, he wouldn't wish his son suffering. Besides, the Americans hadn't done anything to the Asgardians, and Ragnarok wasn't their fault. On the contrary, they had spoken up for the Asgardians when they were homeless, securing a habitat for them. Wasn't that a favor? With billions of Earthlings to save, why would they dwell on such a trivial matter? Thus, Tony and Steve from 2023 tacitly chose to forget the incident, ignoring it. Perhaps all this is indeed Odin's doing, but Earth's power is probably no match for Asgard. No, 2011. Tony interrupted Steve with a wry smile. It's not that Earth lacks power, it's that America lacks the power to oppose them. What kind of organization is SHIELD? 2023. Tony had noticed this organization appearing numerous times in the news he'd found on Friday, making it a highly visible presence. It's an organization similar to SHIELD, but unlike SHIELD, it's not a global organization. It's exclusively Chinese. 2011. Tony replied, Nick Fury once told me that SHIELD has a long history, dating back 2,000 years. It's known as Spear in the East, Shield in the West. The two people from 2023 exchanged glances and shook their heads. I've never heard of it. That shows they're very good at hiding. Perhaps your universe also has SHIELD, but it's just never shown up. 2011. Tony speculated maliciously. Did they stand up when Thanos attacked? Steve, with the guileless simplicity of a soldier, detested politicians who deliberately sent soldiers to their deaths. If SHIELD, despite its apparent strength, didn't step up when Thanos attacked, what difference would that make them any different from politicians who sent soldiers to their deaths? The concept of SHIELD originates from the comic Avengers: Infinity War, published in English in 2012. In the comic, Zheng Xian explains the emergence of SHIELD, citing the threat posed by Thanos during the events of Infinity War. This led China to emulate SHIELD by establishing SHIELD and its superhero team, Conferred Gods. However, the subsequent comic Legends of the Shield expanded upon this, extending SHIELD's history back 2,000 years. This undoubtedly creates a misconception. If China already possessed SHIELD, why didn't it show up when Thanos attacked? Why? Because the despicable, short-sighted Chinese deliberately concealed their strength, unwilling to use it, waiting for the Americans to bleed. Moreover, the added context contradicts Zheng Xian's previous lines, which perfectly demonstrates the hypocrisy of the Chinese people. Has the message Marvel's editors intended to convey changed over the decades? So when Tony and Steve from 2023 learned of the existence of SHIE, they immediately began to wonder if their own universe actually had SHIE, and if so, why didn't they intervene when Thanos attacked? However, Tony from 2011 caught a key phrase and quickly asked, what does Thanos attacks mean? The two from 2023 had no desire to interfere with the course of history in their alternate universe. But the course of events in this universe had already surpassed their imaginations. How could America be in civil war? How could America be weakened? How could America fall from its throne as the world's hegemon? Once they learned what was happening in this universe's America, they had already made their choice. Since they couldn't return immediately, They would do their utmost to help their own America escape its predicament while searching for a way to return in the cosmic cube. Tony Stark has always embodied America's eagle, while Steve Rogers represents the American spirit. They are patriots who love America and absolutely cannot accept its decline and demise. Determined to change the irrational course of history in this universe, the two naturally abandoned their principle of non-intervention and chose to reveal the future. Loki attacks New York. Tony, from 2023, was stunned, realizing that the chaos in New York wasn't caused by Loki, and he had to start from the beginning. Asgard has two princes, Thor, the eldest, and Loki, the second, the god of trickery in Norse mythology. He invaded Earth in our universe in 2012, bringing a group of Chitauri with him to New York City. 2011 Tony slammed the table in anger, shouting, "I knew Odin was behind this. There's not a single good person in Asgard. In the eyes of these American eagles, anyone who wasn't friendly to the United States and didn't come to lick America's boots was a complete villain." The two from 2023 looked at each other in silence, secretly deciding that Thor must not know any of this. It just didn't make sense. If they continued to reason like this, they would start to suspect the Asgardians of harboring ill intentions. Actually, Loki's invasion was Thanos' doing, Steve corrected. Thanos is a cosmic overlord, but actually the leader of a wandering interstellar military organization. He controls the military forces of various civilizations and has destroyed many of them. To achieve his ridiculous goal, he collected the 6 Infinity Stones and randomly wiped out half of all life in the universe. Speaking of the failure 5 years ago, Tony and Steve from 2023 both looked grim. Although they later found Thanos and chopped off his head with an axe, it was pointless. The dead couldn't be saved. Especially Thanos' original intention and his calm attitude towards death after achieving his goal made the superheroes feel like the villains. How terrible. Thanos believed that the growth of life would eventually consume the universe's resources. So, to relieve the pressure, he took the initiative to act as avenger of punishment, randomly wiping out half of all life to reduce the burden on the universe. Wow, sounds like a lone hero rebelling against tradition, Tony from 2011 exclaimed, commanding Jarvis to project the news footage before the other two changed their expressions. Are you talking about the Thanos with a purple potato head? Thanos, dressed in the traditional ceremonial attire of the Titan Eternals, was speaking at the headquarters of the Earth Civilization Alliance in Beijing. The international audience below the podium applauded enthusiastically, beaming. Wow, X2. What is Thanos doing? Is he an official on Earth? Impossible. He must be plotting something. Steve stood up angrily. Tony, from 2023, listened carefully to Thanos' speech, noting that it focused on improving the status of women in various countries, increasing investment in women's education, and overseeing the removal of legal restrictions and even discrimination against women. After discussing women's issues, Thanos moved on to discuss the protection and education of children and youth. Finally, he solemnly stated that only countries that have completed the required ideological and policy transformation will be eligible for interstellar licenses issued by the SHIEA. Haha, the world-destroying demon you're talking about is now the Director of Supervision for the Earth Civilization Alliance, responsible for overseeing the transformation of all Earth nations. Only those nations that pass his review and approval are eligible to integrate into the interstellar civilization system led by China. The 2011 Tony couldn't help but feel jealous of the SHIE in China, his words tinged with sourness. But the two people from 2023 were completely shocked, looking as if they'd seen a ghost. Regardless of sour taste, anyone with even a basic understanding could see that Thanos was doing a good deed, devoting himself to Earth's people and being a great interstellar warrior. But why was their universe's Thanos so focused on killing people? Was it because this universe's Earth was now dominated by China? I worked late yesterday and was so exhausted. I'll definitely finish today's post and try to catch up on yesterday's. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338 You can't restrict human freedom, so you let humans be killed freely by aliens? Impossible, Steve Rogers from 2023 suddenly shouted, absolutely impossible. Unlike Tony Stark, a capitalist, who understood the true nature of America more clearly, Steve, a soldier who grew up during the era of America's true rise, held a more genuine and sincere affection for the country. Consequently, Steve was even more reluctant to believe anything was wrong with America. It wasn't America that was at fault, it was this world. This Thanos is the problem, not the one we destroyed, Steve roared. Tony from 2023's face darkened. He looked away from the screen and across the table at his alter ego, only to see a smile tinged with thinly veiled sarcasm. As professional scientists, they knew that individuals in parallel universes possessed identical personalities and talents, like clones, perhaps even more real than the self they saw in the mirror. Any divergent destinies could only be due to external factors influencing their respective opportunities or choices. Just as the two Tony Starks were not fundamentally different, the two Thanos would be no different at all. The only factor influencing their different choices was external circumstances. But as America's elite eagle, Tony from 2023 refused to believe that America was inferior to the country across the ocean. It must be that changes have occurred in this universe that we're currently unaware of. It's very likely that all these changes stem from the same source. It's definitely not that America is inferior, it's just someone playing dirty tricks. This must be it, there's no other possibility. Yes, it must be, Steve said eagerly. Even our presence here is the work of this unknown entity. To refuse to accept the notion that America is inferior, the two of them had already engaged in a pattern of unfounded associations, willing to make unfounded deductions. It should be said that sometimes, nonsensical logic can lead to the truth more quickly. However, they forgot, or perhaps, overconfident in their strength, overlooked the fact that knowing but being unable to change is more painful than knowing nothing at all. Mr. Stark, this Thanos, while Steve's background and life experiences limited his understanding of the true nature of the capitalist world, he possessed a keen sense of reasoning, and he immediately realized that this Thanos, so different from their own, on the screen might hold the key to the solution. If he could think of anything, the genius Tony Stark could certainly think of it even more. Sorry, if you want to get close to him, I can't help you, Tony from 2011 responded with a mixture of sarcasm, self-mockery, and resignation. The Earth Civilization Alliance's headquarters isn't in New York, and I can't help you infiltrate it with my power. I also advise you to give up the idea of infiltrating China, because the power of SHIE is far greater than you can imagine. Jarvis then played footage of SHIE's resistance against the Makru. Resistance really gives the Makru a lot of credit. This was clearly a one-sided massacre of the Makru by SHIE. If they had gone all out from the start, the Makru wouldn't have even entered the atmosphere. Watching the footage, Tony and Steve from 2023 looked on in disbelief. While the Makru were far fewer in number than the soldiers controlled by Thanos, Thanos's men were comprised of mere ragtag troops. No more than 3 could rival the Makru masters shown in the footage, and that included Thanos, the leader. But even against Thanos's minions, even with the combined strength of the Avengers, Wakanda, and the Guardians of the Galaxy, they still gained nothing. Meanwhile, SWIE was able to easily annihilate the vast Makru population without breaking a sweat. That's just the power SWIE demonstrates, 2011 Tony emphasized. Perhaps that's what forced Thanos to change. The two from 2023 looked grave, forced to consider the matter. Okay, I'll give you all the information you want, and except for the things I can't do, I can also provide any assistance you need. Hearing this, Tony from 2023 understood his intention and spoke directly. Say but I'm a businessman, 2011 Tony said proudly, and I believe in the principle of equivalent exchange. What do you want? Tony from 2023, confident that he understood his 10-year-old self well, had come prepared. Armor design data for the next 10 years? No problem, I can share it with you. As he spoke, he took out the glasses loaded with Friday and skillfully uploaded the data to a dedicated server floating in low Earth orbit. Jarvis reminded Tony from 2011 that the other party had broken through the firewall and was accessing the server and transmitting data. Since they were both Tony Stark, it was normal for them to be able to do this. It would be a problem if they couldn't. But after the other party finished transmitting, Tony from 2011 scanned the file directory and frowned immediately. Why is there no spaceship manufacturing data? Since you have experienced an alien invasion, it is impossible that you have not seized alien spacecraft. Why do you want this? Tony from 2023 was surprised. Tony from 2011, had an expression of disbelief on my face and repeated the other party's question. What do you want this for? Are you Tony Stark? Don't you even understand the importance of spaceships to human civilization? Tony from 2023 reacted and had to shake his head. I did repair a spaceship myself and understand the structure of the spaceship, but I'm sorry, I don't have the blueprints. Perhaps knowing that this reason would never be accepted by his other self, he quickly added, even if I still remember, I can't draw it for you. Huh? Tony from 2011 couldn't believe that these words came from his other self. Steve next to him quickly chimed in, Tony, Earthlings aren't ready to venture into space yet. A rash advance would only bring disaster to Earth. Holy crap, 2011. Tony couldn't believe Steve would say that, and he immediately erupted in curses. Are your brains full of shit? You, an arms dealer, a war veteran, are actually saying such childish things? Even if Earthlings stay hidden on Earth, will the danger from space be lessened? Facing an enemy from space, should we hide like turtles? Must we wait until the enemy descends on Earth before we're forced to resist? After the base universe was freed from the influence of Marvel consciousness, not only did the Chinese gain the right to think freely, freeing themselves from the constraints of arrogance and prejudice, but even those in America were able to break free from the bizarre settings edited by Marvel and return to normal logic. Tony in this universe simply couldn't comprehend the bizarre logic of the other. However, his opinion echoed the Iron Legion line plan proposed by Tony in 2023, so Steve, who had previously strongly opposed it, stood up and reiterated his point. We cannot make choices on behalf of all humanity, let alone restrict human freedom and force the world to live in an order imposed by force. That's Nazi behavior. I'm a jerk. Tony in 2011 continued his rant. You can't accept the arrival of the interstellar age on behalf of all humanity, so you're rejecting it on behalf of all humanity. You can't restrict human freedom, so you're allowing all of humanity to be freely killed by aliens at will. Haha. The funniest thing is, you actually say we can't allow the world to live in an order imposed by force, so, you two wise men, please tell me, what is the basis for the order maintained by the nations of the world? What is the basis for America's security? What is the basis for the stability of the streets, if these are all Nazi behavior? Why don't you persuade all of humanity to dissolve their respective countries? Why don't you go to the White House and persuade them to disband the mold? Chapter 339. How come all the respected superheroes have become wanted criminals here? I went into the room after the previous chapter, and I'm so overwhelmed. I've been revising for 2 hours and still haven't finished it. I need to rewrite another chapter. At this moment, Tony Stark from 2011 suddenly realized how naive, ignorant, and incomprehensible these two guys from 10 years in the future were. Old man, are you really Tony Stark? Tony from 2011 expressed strong doubts about the man with the same face across the table. A former arms dealer might have a change of heart and give up the arms business, but he wouldn't completely change the logical habits he'd cultivated over the years. As Tony Stark said in the first Iron Man film, when faced with a female reporter's questioning, he quoted his father, Howard Stark, saying, "If you want to avoid being bullied, you have to use a bigger stick than the other person." Such are the values of an arms dealer. How could they be so easily overturned? Tony from 2023 could only smile awkwardly. He had wanted to push the Iron Legion project, but he couldn't be persuaded, physically speaking. Mr. Stark, we have no intention of discussing a clash of values with you, Steve emphasized. If you can offer us some assistance, we'd be grateful. If not, that's fine, we can leave. Although the other man was also Tony Stark, he held no real friendship with him. The Stark family hasn't fallen so far as to lose the etiquette of hospitality, although he failed to obtain the spaceship manufacturing materials he sought from his alter ego. Tony in 2011 still retained his upper-class decorum. Planning a quick getaway, the two checked into Tony Stark's Hawaiian estate. Tony from 2023 had a certain impression of the place, having visited several times on vacation in previous years, and didn't need servants to entertain him. After washing and changing into clean clothes, Steve went to Tony's bedroom next door and said, "We need more help. Perhaps we can look for my version of myself in this universe." Tony Stark was once an arms dealer with a volatile personality. Before his multiple transformations, he would never have been willing to sacrifice himself to save the world. Although Steve wasn't yet aware that the Tony he knew had quietly reached a level of thought he admired, he had gradually come to appreciate him over the past decade. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent him a phone after the events of Civil War. Compared to the Tony he knew, Steve couldn't quite trust the Tony of 2011, especially since he had already admitted he couldn't help them get to Thanos. This left Steve with only one option. At this point, I've been unsealed by SHIELD, more than unsealed. Tony said with a complex smile, having Friday project the collected information onto the white wall. See for yourself. Within a moment, Steve was stunned. There are two of me in this universe? And one of them is a wanted criminal in America. What the hell? How could superheroes, revered in their universe, all be wanted criminals here? Superheroes become wanted criminals, while supervillains become good people dedicated to humanity. Is this a distortion of human nature or a decline in morality? It can't be another American problem, right? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Upon arriving in New York that afternoon, the searches Tony used Friday were dominated by the American Civil War, a hot topic that had dominated the charts for 6 months. Their attention was completely captivated by the Civil War, eager to understand the cause. Consequently, Tony and Steve didn't bother to look at other information. It wasn't until the evening, when Tony once again had Friday collect and analyze the information, that he found news about Captain America. The events outside Hell's Kitchen had gone unreported by the media. America even implemented a net cleanup within its own servers, constantly guarding against the upload of such damaging material. Even if someone managed to capture footage of the incident, they couldn't upload it. The Chinese internet was controlled by the SHIEA's artificial intelligence, making Friday unable to access it, and thus unable to find any information about what had happened in Hell's Kitchen. However, America had branded the real Captain America the mastermind behind the Houston incident, widely publicized it, and even issued a serious warrant. These news reports were easily found. What the hell? Steve was puzzled. This universe is truly toxic. Perhaps if we find the other one, or the other two, we can figure out what's going on, Tony said. Can you pinpoint their whereabouts? Steve turned and asked. Tony quickly clicked on the screen, singled out the fake captain who preferred to wear a uniform, and pointed at the screen. That one's easy to find. The other one seems to have vanished. He's nowhere to be found online. They're on their way to New York, along with Sam Wilson and, zooming in on the gas station's surveillance footage, Tony saw another man sitting in the back seat of a car. Wow. It's Brock Rumlow. Steve's eyes widened. Sure enough, Crossbones was smiling and talking to another Steve, with Sam Wilson beside him, looking familiar. Could this Captain America be the captain of Hydra? Tony was shocked. Steve was even more shocked, even thinking back to that afternoon in 2012, in the Stark Tower elevator, when he'd easily tricked the Mind Scepter out of him with a single chant of Hydra. Could it be that just by saying a slogan, his alternate universe self had become Hydra? Or was it because the Steve Rogers of the other universe had been Hydra that he could so easily blurt out, "Hail Hydra"? For a moment, Steve was caught in a chicken and egg dilemma. Let's go back to New York. We must find him. Steve immediately stood up. Please, I haven't taken the serum yet. I need to rest, Tony complained. We can sleep on the plane, Steve insisted. This was a matter of faith and honor. There was no time to delay. The two of them bid farewell to Tony from 2011 at night, requesting the continued use of his plane and flight authorization. Tony from 2011 accepted. Tony and Steve from 2023 did not linger and returned to New York the same way they had come. Sir, the two macro are still over New York City. If they were to appear before the public, SHIE would likely mistake them for you and Captain Steve, Jarvis warned his master. Tony stood by the window, watching the plane take off and fly into the night sky. His eyes were deep, but his tone was cold. SHIE uses the macro people to test us, and I can also use people from the parallel universe to test them. At worst, we can reveal the identities of the two of them. Chapter 340 Father-in-law is the hope of saving America. Shenran's manipulation of two macro individuals to wreak havoc on New York City was interpreted by Americans and the world as a test by the SHIE fearing an all-out war. Most American elite eagles remained silent, allowing New Yorkers to suffer the devastation of the aliens. However, some, unable to bear the consequences, stepped forward to maintain order and rescue the residents. With senior New York police officers taking sick leave en masse and traveling to Europe and Australia for treatment, former Queens Police Chief George Stacey was promoted to Commissioner of the NYPD, becoming the last remaining senior leader. The fearful officers fled, but the pragmatic George chose to remain. The macro activity is concentrated in Manhattan, northern Brooklyn, and western Queens, George explained to the significantly fewer officers in his office. He drew a circle on the map and continued, "We must defend the Brooklyn Bridge. It's the citizens' last resort, Several bridges near central Manhattan had been destroyed, leaving only the Brooklyn Bridge, located slightly further away. We can maintain order and prevent rioting gangs from storming the bridge, but what if aliens attack? Someone asked bitterly. They were just ordinary police officers. Even the military wouldn't dare deploy to deal with the massive aliens, so how could ordinary police officers handle an alien attack? I know, this is a dangerous operation, George said gently, looking around at his colleagues who were still willing to stay. So I won't force you to participate. Those who want to go, follow me. With that, George led the way out of the office. It was only recently since Shinran released a macro people, and George's response was considered swift. However, the New York Police Department, once boasting the best pay in the country, where even the brightest graduates of the police academy fought tooth and nail to get in, was now in decline, with a significant loss of officers. No one was foolish, the public had a keen eye. The high-ranking officials had all deserted, clearly indicating a critical situation. Even if you were diligent in your duties at this time, you wouldn't be able to find a leader who happened to be passing by. Yet, some chose to stay, to persevere. The right things are always difficult, someone always needs to do them. Despite his own self-inflicted wound, George was more responsible than most men, choosing to march against the tide. 3 police cars rushed across the Brooklyn Bridge and reached the Manhattan side. Everyone, maintain order. We'll secure the bridge ahead for you. Chief George ultimately brought fewer than 10 officers, all of whom were his closest confidants who had followed him throughout his rise through the ranks of the Queen's Police Department. People are drawn to groups, and officers who caught George's eye naturally possessed a certain amount of courage and compassion. 3 police cars, 1 in front and 2 behind, were positioned across the bridgehead as the panicked crowd scurried toward Brooklyn. No one was allowed to drive onto the bridge, they had to get out and walk, a rule that naturally drew resistance from some of the more aggressive individuals. "Fuck you. Let me pass," a large white man shouted from the driver's seat. He floored the accelerator, ramming into several cars parked in front of the line and forcing his way through. A bunch of idiots. When it comes to escaping, it's all about who runs faster. As for whether he'd kill innocent people who ran slower, who told you to run slower? Seeing the police, the man didn't retreat. Instead, he pulled a gun from the trunk of his car and fired at the officers behind the perimeter. As an American, who couldn't get a gun? George, no longer shying away, drew his sheathed sword and dashed forward, knocking the gun from the man's hand. He tapped the man's chest lightly, then struck the car door with his palm, sending the moving car careening off the road. Chief George had been studying the Evil-Repelling Sword technique for 3 years, mastering it to the point of impenetrability. Combined with his immense courage and tenacity, his skills were undoubtedly second to none among the millions of American fathers-in-law, though he could only defeat Adam Smith, blessed by the Eye Demon. Seeing George's attack, everyone present was stunned, especially his trusted followers, whose expressions were shrouded in confusion. "Chief George, you, boss, what's wrong with you?" Nowadays, almost every adult male in America is unaware of the evil-defeating sword technique. They all know that the path to becoming a transcendental being is not difficult, it just depends on the willingness to make the sacrifice. Most normal men wouldn't. For most men, toiling away for that one thrill is all it takes. Without that thrill, what joy is there in life? So, despite the rapidly deteriorating situation in America and the increasing number of men resorting to self-harm, only 2 or 3 million have been reported so far, the vast majority of whom are LGBTQ+ and transgender individuals. Normal men wouldn't make such a decision unless driven to desperation. Therefore, his subordinates were shocked to see even Chief George, despite his high position, resort to self-harm. Many of the older officers knew Chief George as a true man, often seeing him in the station bathroom. Furthermore, Chief George had been married and had a daughter, but his wife had died in a gang-related revenge plot. They couldn't understand why Chief George would resort to self-harm. George didn't address their doubts, simply smiling, "Keep holding the line. I'll be at the front," some of his men suddenly understood. For the past 2 or 3 years, Chief George had always led the charge in every serious case, protecting the officers he was escorting. He'd even achieved a police miracle of not having a single officer killed or seriously injured in the past 2 or 3 years. This is free America, after all. A frontline officer in America who didn't fire their weapon for a month would be considered derelict of duty. As the largest police department in the country, in this materialistic city, The New York Police Department inevitably fires a few shots every day. Shooting is bound to result in casualties, yet George managed to ensure his officers left and returned safely, without a single loss. This earned Chief George an unprecedented, unwavering fan base. Who wouldn't want to follow a boss who could solve crimes and return safely? Boss, Chief, the men who understood were moved, their eyes moistened. All right, get back to work, George waved nonchalantly, standing in front of all his colleagues. He never regretted his decision to commit suicide. For 3 years, he had lived up to his resolve, never allowing his colleagues to die in front of him. But he hadn't forgotten the pain Adam Smith had inflicted on him. Given the opportunity, he would put everything aside and fight to the bitter end, seeking justice for his former colleague. Unfortunately, George only targeted the specific perpetrators, but failed to truly realize that the other perpetrators of his colleague's tragedy were cold-blooded capital and arrogant bureaucrats. However, another inorganic person who appeared in New York City around the same time had already grasped the true path to change America. Captain, I found out, Johnny Blaze reported to the real captain, Steve Rogers. The first neighborhood the two aliens appeared in was Hell's Kitchen. Hearing the familiar name, Steve was momentarily distracted. He couldn't help but recall the scene of the Rogers couple's death, as well as the companions he had fought alongside, the young people who had been reformed and had regained hope in life. These young people had made him realize that gangsters weren't born that way, they could find redemption and deserved hope. But all of this was destroyed by the high-handed masters, simply because they needed a dump like this, simply because the young people here saw a different path. Let's go. Steve stepped forward. He was no longer the man he was 3 years ago. He was stronger, with a stronghold and a group of like-minded companions. This time, he wouldn't allow himself to fail again. The noble gentleman fled in panic, while the inorganic people were busy saving New York. As expected, the father-in-law was America's true hope. True to his word, this chapter makes up for the one from the day before yesterday. P.S. I generally don't like to deliberately belittle certain characters. I will also highlight the shining points of these superheroes, comparing them with different values to make them aware of their logical flaws and thus debunk the lie of the American spirit. If a good man like George Stacy is forced into a desperate situation, doesn't that just prove that there's something wrong with America? P.P.S. In the upcoming plot, Shen Ran will play the role of destroying Captain America and triggering America's self-destruction. Guess which Captain America he will destroy? Don't worry, Shen Ran's ending will definitely make everyone happy, and if not, no money will be charged, drunkenness is not included. Chapter 341 Spider Team Captain America gathers in Hell's Kitchen. Steve Rogers, the true captain, wasn't the only one returning to Hell's Kitchen. The three little ones, who had witnessed the massacre of the residents by the American higher-ranking officials, had also returned. During summer vacation, unlike many American children who chose to stay in school to avoid a war at home, the three little ones resolutely chose to return home to care for their families. Since Commissioner George hadn't left America at this time, Gwen Stacy naturally wanted to help her father. After the outbreak of the American Civil War, various countries implemented policies restricting the entry of American refugees. Americans seeking to escape the war abroad had to pay a higher price, as peace was the most precious commodity. While the wealthy didn't mind, and the restrictions didn't apply to them, working-class Americans couldn't afford the cost. Countries that had previously offered visa-free entry to Americans, even those who would have kowtowed to them, had now changed their ways, leaving the arrogant Americans furious, yet helpless. The once mighty United States was now shattered. Young Aunt May also wanted to seek refuge abroad, but her family was modest. Peter Parker, worried about his family's safety, applied for his final exams early so he could return to New York to protect her. Principal Tom naturally agreed. Ned Leeds' family was more comfortable. His parents, having spent nearly half their fortune, had secured 2 places in Australia. Their son, a brilliant student at the magic school, wanted to make money after graduation, not take it easy. He had to secure his life first so he could enjoy a good future. Seeing his 2 friends choose to return to New York, the skilled and daring Ned naturally refused to back down. He spent only 1 day in Australia with his parents before using the school's globally distributed portkey to return to New York. When Shen Ran controlled the Macro people to destroy New York, the 3 little ones happened to be at Peter's house in Queens. Ned's parents had already sought refuge abroad and had been staying there for the past few days. Hearing the distant explosion in Manhattan, Peter and Ned, who were playing games, and Gwen, who was absorbed in a magic book, all looked up and exchanged glances. This was already their third semester at Hogwarts. Having completed 3 semester-long missions, the 3 little ones were no longer ordinary children. They had seen blood and committed murder. Something's happened. Gwen, now taller and older, closed her book and put it into the small leather bag she'd cast the space expansion charm. Haha, time to stretch my muscles again. Ned threw down his game controller and danced with joy, eager to try. The 2 boys, finally entering puberty, had grown taller and stronger, their voices honking. Peter immediately said, "Aunt May isn't off work yet. Let's go to the fast food restaurant first." New York City hadn't yet been besieged by the Southwest rebels. Even if an army were truly at the gates, the various infrastructure and service industries that kept the city running wouldn't disappear. Aunt May's fast food restaurant remained open. Originally a worker, Aunt May took on part-time jobs to provide a better life for her nephew. Later, when Peter was accepted into Hogwarts, she received a bonus from the federal government, a rare tax-free bonus. To win over these future wizards, American leaders resorted to lavish spending, offering green cards and housing to the families of those admitted abroad, and even arranging employment. They treated the wizards at home even better, providing jobs to those who wanted them and simply paying them. Aunt May used the money to open a fast food restaurant, but her cooking skills were limited, so she had to hire a chef. Neighbors frequently frequented the restaurant, and the nearby gangs, knowing they had a wizard, were reluctant to collect protection fees and even warned thugs from other neighborhoods not to cause trouble. While the food was average, the prices were affordable, making it popular among the working class. Without gang oppression or harassment, operating costs were significantly reduced, resulting in decent returns. The 3 little ones quickly arrived at Hot Aunt May's 2 blocks away. Lunch customers had been startled by the distant explosion in Manhattan. Peter, Aunt May emerged from behind the cash register. "Close up, let's go home," Peter advised Aunt May, a veteran. "Something's happening in Manhattan, and it might spread here soon." Several customers who had run outside pushed the door back in, shouting, "Oh no! Monsters are attacking Manhattan." At this, the diners who were eating dropped their food and ran out of the fast food restaurant. Fortunately, Aunt May had switched to pay-as-you-order model after Peter's reminder, otherwise they would have lost money today. Why did Peter make this suggestion? Because he had witnessed many sudden riots in America and had a premonition that future ones would be more common, so he was preparing for the worst. "Everyone, go home early, and we'll still get paid today," Aunt May said to the chefs and wait staff. She was still very kind, not turning capitalist once she became the boss. After hastily cleaning up and closing the shop, the 3 little ones took Aunt May away. Peter's house is in a high-rise apartment building. "If it collapses, Aunt May will be in danger," Gwen said quickly. "Let Aunt May hide at my house first. You won't stay with me." Aunt May, hearing the 3 little kids' subtext, looked anxious. "Principal Tom taught us, with great power comes great responsibility," Ned said with a cool expression. "Yes, we're going to save them," Peter said firmly. "You guys," Aunt May sighed, feeling both worried and proud and touched. "Don't worry, we won't rush into battle against the 2 aliens in the sky, we're just saving them," Gwen assured her. "Okay, stay safe." Aunt May, not the kind of pushy parent, decided not to hold her children back. Gwen's house wasn't far away. After dropping Aunt May off at her cottage, the 3 little ones retrieved their broomsticks, which had been kept in Gwen's small purse, and flew towards Manhattan. They fought their way against a flow of people, rescuing residents who were unable to escape due to various difficulties, and even found themselves outside Hell's Kitchen. Strange. Why are other neighborhoods bustling, but this one so quiet? Gwen, with her keen intuition, seemed to realize something. "Should we go in?" Ned wasn't the least bit flustered. A full year had passed since their first semester mission, and the 3 little ones had made significant progress in both their magical reserves and their combat experience. They'd also discovered that since the appearance of a spider symbol on their chests, their bodies had become even stronger, surpassing adults in all aspects. Even without magic, they were already transcendent beings. With a spider totem, martial arts, and magic combined, the spider team of the base universe had already surpassed the Spider-Men of other universes. Furthermore, they were still in adolescence, with years of growth and development ahead. With his skill and courage, Ned wasn't afraid to charge into a fight with a Mac crew. "Look, there's a group over there," Peter's spider sense activated, alerting him to approaching danger. He looked in the direction and spotted the real captain and his group sprinting towards Hell's Kitchen. "It's him." Gwen was slightly surprised. "The Captain America who claims to be from a parallel universe. It seems there are indeed big monsters in there to fight." Ned's eyes lit up and he encouraged his teammates, "Don't hesitate, let's go too." Chapter 342, Captain America Expands Red. In addition to Spider-Team and the real captain and his crew, the fake captain also arrived in New York City with Falcon and Crossbones, heading for Hell's Kitchen. Tony Stark and Steve Rogers from 2023 followed the tracks left by the fake captain. Shen Ran, the instigator, hadn't anticipated attracting 3 Captain Americas, an Iron Man, and 3 magical Spider-Men. Of course, confident in his own strength, he wasn't worried about these American superheroes. He was more concerned about his former employer, SHIE, whom he had spent 20 years with but barely understood. Strangely, the 2 Macros had been stalking New York for most of the day, yet SHIE hadn't yet arrived. Having witnessed SHIE's complete defeat of the Macros, Shen Ran wouldn't be so foolish as to assume they were incapable, much less fail to recognize the 2 striking, distinctive alien creatures. Sitting on an empty sofa in the rooftop ballroom of a luxurious nightclub in Hell's Kitchen, Shen Ran pondered this. Aren't they curious at all about seeing another Macro appear on Earth? Having already changed his identity, Shen Ran wasn't worried that SHIE would link the previous Lankinian to his new one. After all, he had used the Lankinian identity for 43 years without issue. He had spent 20 of those years with SHIE. He had tried numerous times, even attempting another by selling the American branch at the end of 2007, but SHIE still failed to discover his identity. Judging by SHIE's recent strength, Shen Ran believed the wish-granting power he had gained from Nian must have surpassed SHIE's capabilities. After all, it couldn't have been acquired in the last year or two. Since they had this power before, it was impossible for them to not use it when the American branch was destroyed. They must have used it before and found it to be ineffective. After sorting out the logic, Shen Ran felt confident. His reasoning was sound, but someone was cheating and illogical. Shen Ran wasn't worried about his identity being discovered. At worst, he could just teleport away and find a new identity. If even the SHIE Bureau couldn't do anything to him, who on earth should he fear? So he was content to remain at his ease, dismissing the 2 Macro men and then watching the situation unfold. The American government's reaction was just as he'd expected. After all, he'd immigrated to America with his family in the 1950s and was well aware of the American government's nature. Only the few civilian superheroes hadn't stepped forward to play savior, which somewhat surprised Shen Ran. He hadn't anticipated the wonderful misunderstanding that had fallen upon the American Eagle forces. The SHIE Bureau's continued inaction had stalled Shen Ran's planned next move. Just as he was considering whether to make another move, his subordinates suddenly arrived with a report. "Boss, a group has broken in and are questioning the minions. They seem to be targeting you, boss." The burly white man who had once been the dorm supervisor at the safe apartment had become Shen Ran's only confidant. After changing his identity, he severed contact with his former subordinates. Only this burly white man, having seen something slightly different about Shen Ran, was able to recognize him and, for the time being, was he afraid to betray him. However, if the SHIE agency sent its true experts, Shen Ran would surely have eliminated the subordinate who could identify him first. The group currently operating were none other than Steve Rogers and Johnny Blaze. They had also noticed the sudden quiet in Hell's Kitchen, but couldn't find the source. They resorted to the old superhero tactic, interrogating the minions and demanding the location of their boss. Unfortunately, the only people who had seen Shen Ran in his current state were gang leaders or officials, having already followed the 2 Macros into other neighborhoods, looting and robbing. The minions left to guard Hell's Kitchen had never seen Shen Ran in his current state. After searching several gangs, Ghost Rider Johnny even used his eye of judgment to make an example of them, but the remaining minions remained in a state of dismay, shaking their heads. "It seems they really don't know why these 2 aliens are in Hell's Kitchen," Johnny said helplessly. Steve, the real captain, frowned. This neighborhood wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. Wouldn't it be necessary to search the entire area? While this neighborhood is plagued by gangs and thugs, it also houses a large number of low-income, impoverished individuals forced to live here. Humans are resilient, as long as they can survive. Crucially, The potential mastermind won't sit idly by. Then let him find us. Steve had to preemptively attend to another important task. For years, his group had roamed across America, recruiting those who had suffered government persecution or abuse from powerful figures into their own ranks, bringing them to their base and continuously strengthening the Lone Star Republic in hell. This time in New York, besides attempting to address the macro threat, Steve naturally hadn't forgotten to recruit new allies. Recruiting the Red was a crucial task. Steve and his team immediately appeared openly on the streets of Hell's Kitchen, wielding loudspeakers as they navigated the streets and alleys. "Hey residents, there's going to be a free performance on Main Street," such calls echoed through the streets of Hell's Kitchen, briefly drowning out the distant explosions and clamor. It was already 7 o'clock in the evening, and while the streets were usually bustling, today they were unusually deserted. The residents of Hell's Kitchen had long since retreated to their homes, shutting their windows and doors, shivering and praying to God to keep the alien monsters from harming their homes. It seemed as if God had heard their prayers. While other places were bustling with activity, theirs was deserted. Then, a group of idiots, using loudspeakers, started shouting downstairs, trying to get them to flee to the dangerous streets. Are you crazy? Who would go to a crappy cultural performance at a time like this? Damn it, what if they attract the monsters back? Fuck, get out of here. Anxious residents quickly threw open their windows and hurled empty bottles at Steve's team downstairs, shouting, "Idiots, get out, son of a bitch, who wants to see your show? Get out." Steve's team wasn't surprised by these reactions, they encountered them almost every time. The men in the team quickly drew their swords, easily slicing through the debris thrown from above, undeterred by their companions' cries. "We have captured all the gang members in Hell's Kitchen and seized the wealth they looted. If there are any residents who have been exploited by them in the past, please come forward and provide evidence. We will uphold justice for everyone and return or compensate them." The cultural performances have no appeal, but the magic of money is unparalleled. Are those gang thugs who go to various urban areas to plunder not in any danger? The resistance of the robbed, the justice of the people who stand up for justice, the sporadic attacks from the military and police, and even the two alien monsters above their heads may burst into flames at any time. But for the sake of money, they will not look back. The real Captain Steve Rogers has obviously grown up and learned how to mobilize the enthusiasm of the residents. Now, with the attitude of better to believe it than not, many people walked out of their homes and came to the street. They saw that a high platform had been built on the street, and several rows of gang thugs were kneeling on the platform. "This scene," Shen Ren said with a dark face, "it's so familiar." Chapter 343 The Ultimate Kill in the Plan of True or Fake Captain America. What are they going to do? Peter Parker, hiding in a side alley, gazed at the platform on the main street, bewildered. "A show? How can you have people kneeling down to put on a show?" Gwen frowned, her keen intuition telling her, there's going to be a big scene soon. Shen Ren had assumed the SHIE agents weren't present, but in reality, Zhao Yu had been staying in Hell's Kitchen with the arrest team, managing the situation. Upon noticing the unexpected developments, he immediately pulled out his Den Mushi and sent a message to Lin Hao. Lin Hao was in a meeting with Director Mie and Zheng Xian. Ever since Director Mie took the lead in the monitoring system, he had dealt with numerous second and third generation officials who had attempted to take more than they deserve. As the young masters put it, "My old man fought so hard to build this legacy, so why shouldn't I get a bigger share? You want more too? Why don't you ask your fathers and grandfathers to work harder? You had a way when we needed men on the battlefield, and now you want fairness. How could such a good thing ever happen? Besides, with so many planets at hand, what's wrong with me taking a few more? Not too many, just one for our family. Even if we divide them all up, won't there still be plenty left? A peasant like me should be happy to get a piece of the action. And what about those who still dream of ascending to heaven?" These sentiments were widespread. The SHIE Bureau was under immense pressure, even Zheng Xian's position as director was under threat. Some had already suggested promoting Zheng Xian, emphasizing that he shouldn't be allowed to stay in this position for long, arguing that this was for the good of both him and the Bureau. If Zheng Xian weren't an immortal with 2,000 years of life and deep roots, he would have lost control and been demoted. The situation is dire, Zheng Xian frowned. Now that they've seen the SHIE Bureau's formidable foundation, they're no longer afraid of the risks in space and are ready to seize control. Those who had previously worried about the existence of other powerful civilizations in the universe, but failed to see the benefits before them, had held back. Now, Having watched SHIE slaughter the Macro with ease, he realized that SHIE was immensely powerful, capable of confronting other civilizations in the universe. He had also learned through various channels that SHIE had defeated the cosmic overlords, the Kree, and seized their wealth accumulated over millions of years. He could no longer sit still. Those were tens of thousands of resource-rich planets. Seizing just one would mean endless wealth, guaranteeing the family's survival for thousands, even tens of thousands of years. The world's richest man? Compared to an entire planet? That's a bit weak, isn't it? It was a perfectly natural rendition of the film Don't Look Up. The powerful and wealthy would resort to any means necessary to increase their wealth. So, according to the young masters, not only do I have to hand over the spoils, but I'm also responsible for their family's future safety in the universe. Lin Hao sneered, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. Old Thanos, I leave these people to you. As always, follow the rules. Arrest those who need to be arrested, kill those who need to be killed. Thanos nodded silently. He knew he was just that kind of good guy. With his wisdom and strength, he could easily counter any tricks the Earthlings could devise. As long as Lin Hao, the strongest, didn't change his mind, these clowns wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Once these young people, deliberately pushed forward, were dead, the old men hiding in the background, plotting their actions, would naturally realize this was a force they couldn't contend with. If they still wanted to die, they would be killed with their entire families. I'll control the spaceship and the magicians in the Bureau. The star map and the magic book of Kamartaj have been deleted from the Bureau's database, Zheng Xian added. Traveling to outer space is impossible without a spaceship or a magician trained in Kamartaj's teleportation magic. The SHIEA's database originally contained the star map and magic book, but with 150,000 agents all from China, it was impossible for them to escape the influence of their domestic families. Someone would always find a way to steal these things. So Zheng Xian deleted them. Even if someone bribed the crew to forcibly control the spaceship, where could they fly without a star map? Just as they finished discussing these matters, the Den Mushi rang. Seeing Steve Rogers making such a fuss on the video screen, Thanos curiously asked, Director Lin, are you planning to have him transform Americans? Lin Hao had already been honest with Director Mie about the experiences of the Thanos and other parallel universes, and had also told him that two people from the main universe were busy working on it. He had even kept the true and false Captain America plan a secret, and that it was about to end. Reform? Hearing this, Lin Hao shook his head and smiled. How can it be that easy? Although he has been expanding his team in recent years, he has always been precise and targeted. All the people he has recruited have suffered persecution from the U.S. federal government, but even in the United States, the proportion of people who have suffered persecution to the total population is still very low, because once this proportion exceeds a certain red line, those who can't stand it will have jumped out to overthrow the United States. If Steve wants to achieve his goal of rebuilding America, he will have to absorb more people, but these people are not suffering to the extent that they are eager to change. Thanos has an extremely high IQ. After hearing Lin Hao point out the blind spot, he immediately reacted. So, his actions will not only fail to achieve the goal of reform, but will instead cause ideological turmoil among Americans. That's right. Civilians who have been brainwashed by the American top leaders will never accept the set of things they have been slandering for years. Lin Hao smiled. Steve's attempt to force a reversal will only completely detonate the self-perception conflict among Americans. People who have suffered will think what he says makes sense, but the middle class who are still living a decent life will be furious. After more than 60 years of absence, Steve has neglected his own identity, which has been a symbol of America for the past 60 years. Captain America, the very embodiment of the American spirit, leaps forth to utterly refute the very spirit it represents. Tisk tisk, this backstab will drive Americans mad. This is the ultimate weapon in his real and fake Captain America plan. Zheng Xian, sitting across from Thanos, rolled his eyes and explained. He created the fake Captain America to trick the real Captain into thinking he's not from this universe, subconsciously ignoring the significance of the Captain America identity and creating the illusion that even if he does something wrong, it's the work of a Captain America from another time and space. After the real Captain America commits these acts, he'll expose the vulnerability he's pre-programmed into the fake Captain America before the entire world, confirming the real Captain America's identity to the entire nation and triggering a decisive attack on the American spirit. Upon hearing this, Thanos remained silent for a long moment. Big fists are enough, but so are his wicked minds. Such an enemy, now a friendly force, is no problem. The dirtier, the better. Anxious. Chapter 344, The Three Captains Gather Together, Countdown to Collapse. The real Captain America wouldn't realize the ideological conflict his actions would cause in American society. In fact, no Captain America could possibly have such an awareness. After all, they'd never considered rebelling against a Yan gang before, they had no experience. However, Shen Ran, witnessing a familiar scene on the streets of Hell's Kitchen, thought of this. He had appeared as a baby when he was reborn in 1968, but was actually a man in his 20s. He had witnessed those scenes firsthand, and had since experienced the chaos caused by the opening of the country's borders and witnessed the death of the Red Giant Bear. Shen Ran knew full well what Steve Rogers' actions would bring to America. So, he smiled, summoned his trusted subordinates, and ordered, "Get a camera and broadcast this downstairs scene to the entire nation." After all, he was a veteran agent with half a century's experience in both SHIELD and SHIELD. Hijacking a television broadcast signal was no big deal. Huh? The burly white man wondered. Aren't we going to save them? The gangsters being controlled downstairs were all our own people. Shen Ran glanced at him, and the white man stood there in awe, not daring to say anything more. He quickly bowed and retreated. He wasn't the type to feed down and lick the boots. He didn't care about the lives of a bunch of white people and black people. He wanted to establish his own kingdom, and naturally, he hoped that America would be as chaotic as possible. Not long after, the Americans discovered that the TV signal had been hijacked again. The screen showed Steve Rogers' public trial of the gangsters. Jonathan, 28, from Atlanta, has been in New York for 10 years and joined a gang 7 years ago. His crimes include murder, robbery, and rape. Shishmir, 35, from Augusta, arrived in New York at 17 and joined a gang that same year. He's currently responsible for at least 5 murders. One gang member after another was brought to the stage, and Johnny Blaze read aloud the confessions he'd extracted. The residents in the audience initially waited for their share of the money, but after witnessing these outsiders actually kill several of the gang members in public, their emotions gradually flared. Who in Hell's Kitchen hadn't been robbed? Even if they paid weekly tribute to the gang that controlled the street, they still couldn't escape being robbed. There were always those desperate for cash who would temporarily seek out other gangs to earn extra cash. Some wondered, if things were so miserable, why did they still live here? Anyone who could ask such a question was no different from Emperor Wei of Jin. Not to mention that Hell's Kitchen is located in Manhattan, New York's prime district, known as the heart of the world. Even cities like Rio de Janeiro and New Delhi are home to countless impoverished people crammed into chaotic slums. Those who have lived in such places for years have long been forced to learn how to protect their property, acquiring life skills unimaginable to residents of more secure communities. Robbery is commonplace, and countless residents have experienced serious crime. The gangsters on stage have almost always committed crimes against the residents below. Whenever a person's crimes are read out, victims in the audience cry out, "Kill him! Kill him!" Previously, these residents had no hope, as no one stood up for justice. So-called superheroes merely chase people away and enjoy the applause of passers-by. But when the superheroes are gone, the escaped criminals return and become even more rampant. Some superheroes are even more despicable. They've apprehended the perpetrators but refuse to punish them, instead handing them over to the corrupt police force, simply to avoid soiling their own superheroic hands. Now, someone finally stood up to wipe out this bunch of scum. Regardless of whether he was Captain America from another universe, at least this Captain America was doing something human. The audience naturally recognized Steve Rogers' face. Seeing him out of uniform and without crossbones, they knew this Captain America was the villain on the federal government's wanted list. Indeed, Crossbones Brock Rumlow had become the U.S. government's definitive symbol for distinguishing true Captain America from false. As expected, Captain America and Crossbones were a couple, with Bucky as the third person. This was cause for celebration. The public trial on the streets of Hell's Kitchen intensified, stirring the emotions of the residents. Some, feeling avenged, could not help but laugh and cry. The entire nation witnessed this scene via hijacked television signals. When the Southwest Federation's leaders realized the location was New York, they calmed down and even ordered the television stations they controlled to broadcast the show. They were willing to do anything to embarrass the Jews of the Northeast. The more rotten the former American federal government was, the more it proved their rebellion was destined by heaven. The top brass of the Eastern Federation were collectively furious, attempting to interrupt the live stream. No, I can't even turn off the TV, damn it, it must be the evil SHIEA. They just can't stand seeing America prosper. The conglomerates behind the American front had long since emigrated, leaving only minor descendants of the conglomerate families and members of military families who had married into the war effort. This was standard practice, except that during World Wars II, it was the European conglomerates and princes who fled to North America for refuge. Now, it was the other way around. No matter how these guys raged, the live stream wouldn't stop. There's only one solution: send someone to stop them on the scene. And no one responded. They had all witnessed the power the real captain displayed in Houston. Johnny Blaze, beside him, could transform into a flaming skeleton, and the strange flames, if they touched anyone, would kill them instantly. All they had were a bunch of East Factory eunuchs, their remaining armor gone to the consortium bosses. And even if they had, they wouldn't have been able to defeat them. Just when they were at their wits' end, Captain America, the true embodiment of the American spirit, suddenly appeared. On the podium inside Hell's Kitchen, as Johnny Blaze once again raised his gun to execute a notorious gangster, a shield painted with stars flew towards them from a distance. The real captain's reaction was even quicker than Johnny's. He dove forward and delicately caught the shield. Seeing the familiar shield, the real captain frowned slightly, thinking it was the fake captain. "I didn't expect you'd stop me again." The fake captain, in the alley across the street, was stunned. He looked down at his shield, then up at the one on the podium. It was an exact replica. Oh, another one made a shield. At that moment, Crossbones, standing behind him, suddenly spoke to the fake captain, holding his phone. "Captain, I have to take a call first. It's urgent." With that, he turned and ran. There are 2 more chapters left today, and I mean it. P.S. There have been a lot of risks recently. I just accepted the reader's correction for chapter 337, but I was monitored again and I felt a little panicked. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345. The stage is set, the actors are in place. Ho ha, my undercover role is finally over. Crossbones Brock Remlo turned and ran, his steps uncaring and joyous. "Captain, why do I feel like Brock is so happy?" Falcon Sam Wilson turned and asked the fake captain, "Did one of the girls he's pursuing call him?" "He doesn't seem to pursue girls, he only spends money," the fake captain said, puzzled, shaking his head and paying no attention. 2 figures were approaching from the other end of the street. One was wearing Iron Man armor, which wasn't unusual, but the other was wearing a similar uniform, with a figure and face that looked exactly like him. The fake captain in the alley was stunned. He looked left and right, and saw 2 Steve Rogers, plus himself, making 3. The real captain on the dais still thought the Steve striding towards him was the fake captain he'd known before. He repeated his previous question, "Are you trying to stop me again?" As soon as Steve from 2023 saw the man on the dais, he knew he was this universe's other Captain America, the one on America's Most Wanted list. He had originally come to pursue the fake Captain America, but he hadn't expected to discover another Captain America with elusive movements in Hell's Kitchen. You can't deal with these people privately. Even if they've committed a crime, they should be handed over to the police and tried by a judge, no matter who the perpetrator was. Steve from 2023 couldn't sit idly by and watch such vigilante justice. Hearing this again, the real captain smiled. "Have you met Matt? How did you learn his tricks?" "Hey, Captain, don't talk behind people's backs." Suddenly, a red figure fell from a nearby building, repeatedly using the windowsill for leverage, landing effortlessly in front of the real Captain America. It was Matt Murdock, the Daredevil. "Matt," Captain True exclaimed, delighted. "I thought something had happened to you. I couldn't find you." They had experienced the Hell's Kitchen renovation project together. Matt, initially skeptical, eventually accepted Captain True's ideas and learned to work alongside him after witnessing the dramatic changes in the residence. Later, American officials discovered that Hell's Kitchen was reverting to the ways of the Black Panthers and launched a brutal massacre. Captain True was taken away by the Rainbow Bridge, and Daredevil has been missing ever since. After returning from his studies in Asgard, Captain True went back to New York to look for Matt, but couldn't find him. He assumed he'd been killed in the massacre, and he was devastated. After all, Matt Murdock was his first like-minded companion. "I'm sorry, after the massacre, I asked my master to let me retreat and cultivate, and I just recently emerged. It was a frustrating experience." Matt had spent 2.5 years in seclusion with the Stickmaster at his base in South America, only to emerge to find the American Civil War had broken out. "Captain, I'm even stronger now, capable of achieving my goal of changing America." The real captain smiled but said nothing. He could sense Matt's energy fluctuations had grown much stronger, but the world was changing so rapidly that Matt's meager increase wasn't enough to even handle 2 aliens from the next district. Still, the real captain was happy to have his former companion back. At worst, Matt could learn some magic. "Alright, we can fight together again." Seeing the new helper, Steve from 2023 frowned slightly. He had just seen Captain America on the stage easily take the shield, and he felt that the opponent's strength was likely even greater than the 2012 Captain America he had previously fought. "Captain, there's not just this you here, there's another you." While Matt's strength wasn't impressive, his super senses were powerful. Like a three-dimensional radar, he immediately pointed to the alley off the street in the distance, where the fake captain was. Seeing this, the fake captain, hiding in the alley, stepped out. He had always believed it was the real captain, so he wasn't afraid. "Oh my God. There are 3 Captain Americas," Peter Parker, hiding in the alley across the street, exclaimed. "Gwen, you're right, this is going to be a big scene." Louder. "The whole world can hear you." Gwen Stacy slapped Peter on the back of the head. "Ouch." Peter quickly pursed his lips and made a zipper gesture. It wasn't just Spider-Man who was shocked. When the 3 Captain Americas appeared on camera, audiences across America and even the world felt a sense of astonishment. Is Captain America discounted wholesale today? It's over, something big is going to happen. Carol Danvers frowned inwardly on the screen. Phil Coulson, a veteran agent beside her, felt this even more strongly. "I'll take Melinda and the team there." "Carol, how about you go to Washington State again?" Coulson meant for Carol to openly cause trouble for the Indians again, so that SWORD would notice her movements. Now they believe the 2 macro in New York were SHIE probes. Carol, their ultimate trump card, couldn't go there to cause trouble, fearing she might incur the agency's more powerful forces. "But the spacecraft will be detected by SHIE, and if you fly to New York, you'll still be discovered." Carol frowned. This feeling of timidity was awful. She had always roamed the universe, unstoppable and unstoppable. When had she ever felt so suffocated? The image of Lin Hao's fleeting movements left her feeling powerless, forcing her to be cautious. Indeed, she hadn't yet revealed Lin Hao's existence to Coulson and the others. In Carol's view, Lin Hao was unbeatable, and even telling them would only cause more trouble. "I'd like to take a gamble," Coulson said gravely. "Right now, we only suspect the 2 macro in New York are SHIE probes, but we don't know the truth." "You?" Carol exclaimed, stunned. Coulson forced a smile and joked, "I'm afraid it might damage your spaceship." Carol paused for a moment, then patted Coulson on the shoulder and wished him well. Be careful, they were planning to use themselves as bait, so why would she be reluctant to give up a spaceship? If the spaceship appeared in New York and intervened to stop the rebellious Macru, but SHIELD didn't intervene, it would prove they were just imagining things. Carol would immediately turn around and head for New York. Besides this group of former SHIELD agents about to arrive, Captain America's good friend Bucky had inexplicably appeared on the streets of Hell's Kitchen. Who did this? Bucky's memories hadn't been completely erased to begin with, having been reactivated since his last encounter with the fake captain. Not long after, he'd escaped from the Hydra base, deliberately let loose by a Pierce clone, and had been hiding in South America for the past 2 years. He had just been cooking in the kitchen when someone knocked him unconscious. When he opened his eyes, he was on the familiar streets of New York. Chapter 346 The Real Captain America, Change Requires Bloodshed. Hell's Kitchen were stained red with the blood of the criminals. The dead lay quietly in a pool of blood, their emotions stable. The living struggled fiercely, their bound hands and feet twisting like maggots. New York State abolished the death penalty in 2007, which led to a sharp increase in murders and shootings in recent years. This abolition undoubtedly extinguished the criminal's last remaining fear of the law. While those who committed manslaughter and, driven by grief and anger, sought revenge, might repent and not possess the resolve and will to kill again, how could a true criminal, simply because a judge or jury spared their lives, transform themselves into a vegetarian and a useful and harmless person? These blood-stained criminals, seeing no danger of death from murder, would only intensify their violence. Killing and looting offer a quick way to wealth, saving enough for legal fees, which can then be leveraged to avoid years in prison, allowing them to continue their rapid expansion upon release. One might ask, would America still be able to survive under these circumstances? This makes one have to admire the comprehensive system that the capitalist elites have established for America. First, America long ago implemented the requirement that large transactions must be handled by bank transfer. The most commonly used large denomination bill is the $20, while the $100 bill only appears briefly in old movies. This ensures that no matter where you obtain large amounts of money, it must ultimately be deposited in a financial institution, forcing you to launder the money first. This step is designed to facilitate taxation. The IRS taxes all your income, even if it's illegal. Furthermore, if you seek legal counsel after being arrested, you must pay exorbitant fees. Criminal cases involving human life are so expensive that ordinary people can't afford them, even if they break their bank. Indeed, the capitalist elites limit crime and maintain basic social order by increasing post-event costs. Using economic means to control crime is very capitalist. However, this system is actually a process of weeding out the weak. While it limits the emergence of large numbers of petty criminals, it also fosters the emergence of large, well-organized gangs. Large gangs have large memberships, high profits, and rapid wealth accumulation. After enduring the bloody process of primitive accumulation, they would turn to legitimate business and become capitalists. In reality, which consortium hasn't experienced a similar rise? It's their history. As the saying goes, the path is consistent. Can the past, after having satisfied its needs, prevent future generations from following the same path? True capitalists, like Tony Stark, understand this set of rules, and therefore never have the philosophies of Matt Murdock, never hesitating when it's time to act. On the contrary, it's the lower classes like Matt who are fooled by the American judicial system and take the law for granted. Good thing, that's exactly what the masters want. One might ask, why doesn't Mr. Way next door understand this? Well, perhaps it's because the terrifying alley robbed him of his family education, and no one taught him the unspoken rules of the capitalist world. Coincidentally, Steve Rogers also comes from a lower-class background, so he also believes in the great American judicial system, which is civilized, reasonable, fair, and honest, and therefore firmly opposes lynching. While ruthlessness is permitted in battle, the enemy should surrender, and the criminals captured should be brought to justice. Otherwise, what's the difference between these superheroes and criminals? Steve Rogers from 2023 confronted the real captain on stage and solemnly reiterated his point, "You must be my version of that universe. I don't know what you've been through, but you have no right to take their lives, even if they might be criminals, they have the right to stand trial. You and I are not God, and we have no right to decide a person's life or death." The real captain shook his head helplessly, laughing. Another one, he wasn't sure where this Steve Rogers came from, but it was clear he hadn't experienced what he'd been through, and he was destined to be no savior. If you haven't experienced what I've been through, who are you to deny the significance of what I'm doing? I don't know which universe you're from, but I'm sure you've seen that this America is in civil war. Something's wrong with this America, and it needs to change. By killing people, Steve from 2023's eyes suddenly sharpened. He clearly viewed the Steve before him as a thug, brainwashed by darkness, who was determined to change America through bloody means. This was the behavior the Captain America Steve Rogers hated most, the very behavior of the mustache devil portrayed in Western propaganda, and it was something to be condemned. Even if you have a problem, you should learn from Mahatma Gandhi. His gentle approach was the correct way to communicate with the masters. If you resort to violence at every turn and frighten the masters, will you be held responsible? As for whether the masters will listen after you express your opinions, rest assured they will handle it when they have time. What? You want to know when the masters are free? Is that something you can ask? Go where you want to be. The real captain faced the Steve from 2023 with a resounding statement, "Change requires bloodshed." His words shocked everyone. Only then did the audience finally understand what this Steve Rogers was up to. Not content with merely killing a few gangsters, he had the audacity to attack the high-ranking corporate bosses. This is sheer treason. Damn it. This guy isn't our Captain America. He's unworthy of the title. Has his universe changed? Otherwise, how could Steve Rogers, the very embodiment of the American spirit, harbor such outrageous thoughts? Whatever he's changed, we can't let him cause trouble on our turf. Immediately, give orders to those remaining in the country to eliminate this imposter at all costs. Upon hearing the true captain's bold words, the corporate bosses hiding abroad erupted in outrage. The two sides of the American Civil War had unexpectedly reached a consensus to eliminate this dangerous individual first. The Civil War was merely a means of scrambling for resources and power, but this guy was trying to completely change the American landscape. This was unforgivable. As the bosses raged, ordinary Americans were understandably bewildered. Even though this guy's a wanted criminal, he's still Captain America, right? Why would Captain America destroy America, idiot? Captain is talking about change. Shouldn't America change, too? I admit America needs improvement, but there's no need for that, right? 20 years ago, we proved that that approach was useless and doomed. Captain didn't say anything about that? Look how anxious you elites are, he keeps saying Captain. Don't forget, he's not our captain. The supporters were speechless. However, the new character, already at the edge of the stage, was about to offer them strong support. Steve, Bucky, following the voice, was stunned. 3 Steves, 3 times the best friend, that's 3 times the joy. Bucky, the real captain on the podium, was stunned. The fake captain had met Bucky before at SHIELD, and Steve from 2023 already knew his best friend was still alive, but this was the first time he'd met Bucky's true best friend. After many revisions, it's finally here. Go to sleep. Chapter 347. Who ate Captain America's first soup? 3 Steves, 1 Bucky. There wasn't enough Bucky to go around. Why does this feel like 3 men are sharing a beautiful woman? Falcon Sam Wilson glanced around, sensing the increasingly corrupt atmosphere. Stop talking, the fake captain rolled his eyes. Bucky, you're still alive. The real captain, Steve Rogers, on stage, excitedly gazed at his friend below. In the past, he would have jumped down and embraced his friend, but now, with a more important mission, he'd learned to restrain himself, aware of his companion's expectations, and become more cautious. Who knew if this Bucky before him was real or fake, and what his intentions were? A split second later, the real captain noticed that the other 2 Steves showed no sign of surprise. You already knew that. Over the years, the real captain had learned some theories about parallel universes. Combined with previous comparisons with the fake captain and genetic testing, he knew that his versions of himself were identical. If they were identical, it made no sense for them to show no reaction to Bucky's return from the dead. It simply meant that the 2 Steves already knew Bucky was still alive. Steve from 2023 took a look at Bucky, and seeing that he still had the same metal arm made by Hydra, he felt a sense of relief. He was truly terrified by this bizarre universe, and he feared that this Bucky might cause some trouble. He looked up and asked Bucky, Bucky, which universe are you from? What do you mean? Bucky looked around at the 3 Steves, wondering, which one of you is the real Steve? The fake captain, also at the dais, believed himself to be the real Steve from this universe. He had witnessed Bucky being captured by SWIE and then rescued by Hydra, and he believed this Bucky was the Bucky he had grown up with. Although the fake captain's memories of his childhood were limited, only fragments, who wouldn't? How could a normal person remember every single person and event they experienced every day? Everyone remembers childhood memories in a few specific moments, vivid and unforgettable for years. Therefore, the fake captain never doubted his identity. Seeing his best friend in bewilderment, the fake captain quickly stepped forward and explained to Bucky, actually, we're both Steves. They're just from alternate universes, and I'm the real Steve Rogers from this universe. The other 2 Steves didn't respond, clearly acquiescing. The real captain hadn't doubted the fake captain yet, always believing he was from another universe. The Steve from 2023 wouldn't be subject to any cognitive biases, having witnessed his own Bucky reduced to ash. But Bucky wasn't a kindergartner. How could he believe everything someone said? When Pierce's men rescued Bucky from SHIELD headquarters, his memory hadn't fully recovered, and his consciousness was under control. Although he vaguely remembered a Steve calling out to him, it wasn't enough to pinpoint which Steve it was. So, he immediately asked the fake captain, who did I give my virginity to? Who did you give yours to? Holy crap. So exciting, Peter Parker, hiding in the alley nearby. His eyes lit up. Is this something we kids should hear? He said he shouldn't, but he pricked up his ears, his face filled with anticipation. Hurry up and tell me more. I love this. Ned Leeds was even more outrageous. He pulled out a recorder from nowhere and began recording the scene. Where did you get your recorder? Gwen Stacy was stunned. I just got it from home, Ned replied matter-of-factly. I've already learned how to repair it. Lend it to me later so I can copy it, Peter demanded, even raising the stakes to get Ned to agree. We'll play tomorrow, and you'll win 3 games, you too. Gwen turned away, ashamed to be associated with him, but she didn't hide her ears. The others in the room, even the viewers on the screen, were curious about this question. Even Peggy Carter, recuperating at a British hospital, wanted to know. Although she was already very old, and although she and Steve were not destined to be together, she really wanted to know which slutty bitch had snatched her first chance. What are you talking about? The fake captain gave the whole thing away with his first words, his shock fading. My date with Peggy hasn't even started yet. The other 2 Steves suddenly turned and stared at the fake captain. Among them, the real captain of this universe was stunned, as if he had seen a ghost. He had never imagined that this guy was actually an imposter. In the past 3 years, he had never doubted the identity of the fake captain. Bucky quickly stepped back, putting distance between him and the fake captain, staring at him with a sharp gaze, and sneered, when I was 16, I took Steve to the prostitute street, and he picked ahem. The other 2 Steves coughed violently and shouted in unison, that's out of the question, what the hell? With so many people watching, Captain America didn't care about his image? The other onlookers heard these words with a variety of expressions, shock, ambiguous smiles that only men can understand, and the older women in the community showed anger. Damn bitch, she actually stole Captain America's first spot. The audience in front of the screen had a similar reaction. Only Tony Stark, present at the scene, chuckled unkindly. Mr. Rogers, I didn't expect you to have the same experience as me. But I guarantee you, my mentor was prettier than yours. The 2 Steves immediately glared at him, and once again, almost in unison, if I had a rich dad, I'd be just as good. Tony from 2023 immediately shut up. Clearly, no matter which Steve in which universe, this matter was a concern. While he'd undoubtedly brag about his prowess to his good friend Bucky afterward, the reality was clear to those who understood. If a young man is handsome or wealthy, what boy's mentor wasn't a gentle and beautiful older sister? The world's disparity is truly reflected in every aspect. Just think of Steve Rogers' emaciated appearance before the serum injections, and you know he couldn't possibly be popular with women. Even if he paid, his mentor would likely just brush it off, completely oblivious to its significance to the young man. Tony from 2023 retreated in frustration, and the spotlight shifted back to the 3 Captain Americas, more precisely, to the fake captain, who couldn't answer Bucky's question. Even Sam Wilson, who had been following the fake captain for the past 2 years, was stunned. Captain, you? No, I'm the one who's pulling this, the fake captain panicked. Bucky's question not only exposed the fake captain's flaws to the world, but also caused a misunderstanding in the fake captain, who had always believed he was Steve Rogers. Previously, the fake captain had never doubted his identity. Since being unfrozen by SHIELD, the scenes he saw upon opening his eyes. The memories replayed in his mind like a rapidly changing slideshow. However, he truly couldn't remember who he had his first time with. While everyone only has fragmentary memories of childhood, surely anyone with amnesia and a healthy mind would never forget a meaningful first time in their life. Who am I? Chapter 348, You say I'm fake? Do you dare to take off your pants? Who am I? Clutching a vibranium shield and clad in a star-spangled uniform, the fake captain stood amidst the crowd, surrounded by unbridled, inquiring gazes. There were well-intentioned suspicions, but also malicious mockery. There's no shortage of spectators who delight in exploiting others' misfortunes. Who am I? The fake captain felt isolated from the world, his mind tormented by a constant cognitive conflict. As the saying goes, either explode in silence or perish in silence. With the information he had available, it was impossible for the fake captain to achieve logical coherence, meaning he couldn't possibly survive this cognitive conflict. He had no idea how he had appeared, nor where his memories came from. He had originally had a witness, but Crossbones had fled, leaving him without even the information to disprove himself. A weaker person might have abandoned self-doubt, ended his internal struggles, and settled for a life of mediocrity. But the fake captain was a clone of Steve Rogers. Even the enhanced willpower granted by the super soldier serum had been perfectly replicated. He couldn't accept a life of ignorance. So, surprisingly, the fake captain chose to perish. He regained his resolve, his left hand tightly gripping the shield's handle as he sneered at Bucky. "Who are you? What gives you the right to question me?" The fake captain refused to accept reality or doubt himself, firmly believing he was the real Steve Rogers. Wow, he's turned evil. Lin Hao, who had some free time to watch the live stream after the meeting, was quite surprised. Throughout Captain America's storylines, only the time he was first approached by Hydra did he transform into Captain of Hydra due to brainwashing. This was because Hydra had instilled in him the belief from the beginning that he was Captain of Hydra. This was different now. The fake captain, without any misguided understanding, had chosen to turn evil. In the authentic Marvel universe, such a thing would never happen. The cosmic consciousness constantly influences Captain America, Marvel's own son. Even if he became Captain of Hydra, he would inevitably come to his senses. For the audience, this was a novel experience. Captain America was still the same Captain America, the embodiment of the American spirit. Marvel wouldn't be foolish enough to truly destroy its own son. Otherwise, how could they make money? According to the super soldier serum's design, if the recipient turns evil, the dark side of their personality will also expand. Lin Hao observed the fake captain on the screen with great interest, anticipating the changes in his experimental specimen with the attitude of a researcher. After scolding Bucky in Hell's Kitchen, the fake captain looked around and proudly declared, "I am the real Captain America, Steve Rogers." Steve from 2023 frowned, sighing inwardly, another trouble. This guy was clearly not in his right state. The real captain, now certain of his identity, looked at the imposter, whom he once considered a brother, with a complicated expression. Finally, he couldn't bear it and spoke out, "Bucky is right. I really didn't have a virginity. I'll never forget that terrible experience. Stop it. No matter who you are, I'm willing to treat you as a friend. I can help you uncover your past." "Shut up." The fake captain had indeed turned evil. He wasn't moved by the real captain's sincere words, but instead felt annoyed. "Haha." The fake captain suddenly sneered and shouted at the real captain, "You calling me fake? Do you dare to take off your pants?" The real captain's face instantly turned pale, and his companions glared at him. "Take off your pants," Tony Stark from 2023 wondered, "is this a new social etiquette?" Honestly, this etiquette was very similar to his old ways. "Ho ha ho ha," the fake captain laughed heartily. "See, you don't dare." Despite the fake captain's efforts to save face, Bucky and Sam Wilson had already confirmed his authenticity. They both knew that the book of the Sword of Exorcism had spread throughout America and even the world, so taking off pants or not was useless in determining the authenticity. It was simply a personal choice. Bucky's question and the nearly unanimous response from the other two Steves had already laid the answer before everyone. The fake captain, unable to answer, was the real imposter. "Sam, even you doubt me." Seeing his comrades of the past 2 years slowly retreating, the fake captain's eyes were red with anger. "I'm sorry, these past 2 years have allowed me to consider you a friend, but you can't pretend to be Steve Rogers anymore," Sam Wilson said solemnly. He's Captain America, the pride of America. He was also a fan and admirer of Captain America, even using his spirit as a teenager to motivate himself and strive for excellence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to take up Steve Rogers' shield in the future. Therefore, Sam Wilson would not tolerate anyone impersonating Captain America. The pride of America, the fake captain, already irritable, flew into rage upon hearing this. Pointing at the real captain on the podium, he said with undisguised sarcasm, "Didn't you hear what he just said? Your so-called American pride is going to destroy America." Lin Hao, who was watching the live broadcast, and Shin Ran, who was watching from a high-rise building on the street, both smiled with satisfaction. The scene they had been waiting for finally appeared. The public is blind, and most people's attention is easily distracted. The audience, still absorbed in the drama between the real and fake Captain America, had even momentarily forgotten the real captain's bold words. Without this reminder, far fewer people would have remembered it later. This is a trick involving psychology and information communication, often used to divert attention and manipulate public opinion. Many online trolls and professional fan clubs also employ it with skill. When the fake captain shouted this, the Americans in front of the screen suddenly realized that the real Captain America was actually going to destroy America. So he's not a fake. Why? Why would he do this? Is America really going to change? Even the very embodiment of the American spirit wants to change America. He's going to stage a bloody coup. But has America really reached this point? No way, absolutely not. America is great. American institutions and ideas are a beacon for all humanity, with the true captain's identity confirmed by a single soul-searching question from Buggy. The Americans finally experienced the conflict of consciousness that Lin Hao had anticipated. Buggy's question had a significant effect on fueling the fire. Any other question would never have sparked the same level of curiosity and captured their attention like this despicable question. It was a brilliant boost. Chapter 349 Tony, damn, there are so many powerful people in this universe. In the wake of many major events, participants are unaware of what is happening, or the impact their witnesses will have on history. Take, for example, the bystanders who witnessed Archduke Ferdinand's assassination in Sarajevo. Or, on the evening of August 31, 1939, the residents of Gliwice, enjoying a leisurely dinner, only to hear gunfire from the direction of the radio station. Or, even now, the American audience who witnessed a fake captain loudly questioning the real one. Years from now, by some shattered ruin, by a bonfire, dressed in tattered clothes, they will look back and suddenly realize that the source of all their suffering stems from the inherently popular question of who got Captain America's first soup, that woman who never appeared, whose name remains a source of speculation, that prostitute who was likely long dead, destroyed the great United States. Truly horrifying. A nation descended from bandits and thieves destroyed by a prostitute perfectly aligns with their often proclaimed fatalism. At that moment, even Tony Stark, with his immense intelligence, failed to realize the terrifying effect a fake captain's barrage would have. Superheroes excel at dealing with visible enemies. Hidden dangers like this kind of ideological turmoil are beyond their purview. Amir Zemo, using the footage of Howard Stark being killed by the Winter Soldier to ignite a battle between Iron Man and Captain America, has even been hailed as the most intelligent foe the Avengers have ever faced. The Great Demon's turmoil, which ultimately spread across the United States, is far beyond the reach of a few superheroes. This farce must end, he said, not from the fake captain, nor from Shinran, who was reaping the benefits from the covert. It was Steve Rogers in 2023 who spoke. In comics, when a superhero falls on hard times, the villains inevitably step in to show off their power and gloat, only to be defeated by the explosive superheroes. However, the base universe has been freed from the influence of Marvel's consciousness, and both heroes and villains have regained their normal human logic, no longer being manipulated like puppets. Seeing that the temporarily modified plan is proceeding smoothly and the superheroes downstairs have not yet discovered him, Shenran no longer foolishly jumps out to reveal his identity as in the comics, but instead maintains his advantage of the enemy is aware. We are in the dark. Steve, anxious to prevent his own self from sinking deeper and deeper into this universe, is even more impatient. Since I can't convince you to give up this dangerous idea, I'll have to let you go to prison and reflect on your mistakes, Steve from 2023 said, ready to attack. Wow, are you asking him to fulfill your regret for not being in prison 7 years ago? Tony Stark quipped beside him. In 2016 in the main universe, the superheroes were divided by the Sokovia Accords, and a friendly stay-at-home competition took place at Leipzig Airport in Germany. Steve's group suffered a crushing defeat and was taken away by the arriving UN law enforcement officers and imprisoned at sea. However, Steve and the Winter Soldier escaped, and Steve eventually single-handedly broke into the prison and rescued everyone. Tony's group also suffered a setback, as his friend Rhodes was accidentally crippled, becoming the sole casualty of the Civil War incident. I thought after 5 years of marriage, your mouth had become human. Steve glared at him. You'll be disappointed, Tony retorted, I've always been human. Want to fight? Get past me first. Johnny Blaze stood before the real Captain America and, with a bang, transformed into a flaming skeleton. He ripped off the chain from his shoulder and wielded it, transforming it into his signature weapon. Shit, what the hell is this? Tony quickly dodged. The chain swung across the nanosuit, and the hellfire left a distinct charred mark on the sturdy blood-edged suit. Friday immediately showed Tony the energy and nanocomponent depletion. Sir, 6% energy loss, 3% component loss. Energy is easy to replenish. After all, The Tony Stark of this universe also has an arc reactor, but nanocomponents require a new production line to produce them. This mission to search for the Infinity Stones in other parallel timelines was originally a quick mission. The intelligence had been thoroughly analyzed beforehand, confirming the locations of the stones and their respective missions, and preparing for any potential contingencies. If the two nebulae from different timelines hadn't been unexpectedly affected by each other, the 2014 NS wouldn't have been alerted at all. Tony Stark's injury from the Hulk would be the only minor mishap in this operation. Therefore, Tony from 2023 naturally wouldn't be carrying a large amount of supplies, and if the nanocomponents were lost, it would be difficult to replenish them. Damn, there's something wrong with his flames. Tony immediately realized the unusual nature of the hellfire. Ordinary flames couldn't leave such scorch marks on the blood edge armor. Steve, beside him, quickly dodged to avoid being hit by the dancing chains. His situation was even worse, as the real captain still held the shield. I'm coming too. It's a good opportunity for the captain to see the fruits of my training. Matt Murdock charged at the unarmed Steve. With the true captain's identity confirmed, the happiest people were undoubtedly his companions. They had previously worried that the captain would one day return to his own universe, but now that they knew he was a native of the Tunley, such fears were naturally resolved. They were about to embark on a world-shaking undertaking, and they feared a change in their leader. With this reassurance, their morale soared. And us. If you want to cause trouble for the captain, ask my sword first. Several eunuchs in the group charged forward, swords drawn, and began to attack Steve and Tony from 2023. Are you kidding me? Why are there so many powerful beings in this universe? Tony exclaimed in disbelief. It was one thing for the flaming skeleton to destroy his blood edge armor, given its unusual design, but how could these seemingly effeminate figures wield such powerful rapiers? Light, wieldy swords shot out like silver needles. He'd assumed the armor's inherent strength would easily withstand them. After all, even high-caliber bullets fired at high speed struggled to deform the bleeding edge armor, requiring repeated strikes in the same spot. But who could have imagined that these needle-like rapiers could inflict distinct holes on the armor's surface, constantly alerting Tony to the damage to his nano-components? What the heck? Aren't the powerful in this universe worth anything? The transvestites besieging him would rank among the top tier of the Avengers in terms of strength. Only the newcomer Carol, veterans Thor and Hulk, and the newer generation members Wanda and Vision could guarantee victory. Even Captain America was forcing a 50-50 fight against the transvestites. As for the agent duo of Barton and Natasha, and Tony without his armor, they couldn't hold out for more than a few rounds. The rapid firepower of the Evil-Repelling Sword technique is evident here. After 2 or 3 years of practice, the old men have practically perfected this technique to the point of no further advancement, far exceeding the limits of normal human development. At this moment, Tony from 2023 had no idea that there were 2 to 3 million such transvestites in America alone. Truly, transvestites are everywhere, and the supernatural are worse than dogs. Although the America of the base universe was ravaged by Lin Hao's devastation, it has also reaped some side benefits, such as transvestites who master swordsmanship and perverts blessed by various demonic gods. Their combined supernatural power could not only completely overwhelm the America of the main universe, but even dominate Earth. See? The Great Demon King is clearly doing this for the benefit of the Americans. They even have to thank him. Damn, they're so strong, without any side effects. Even Steve, the 2012 Captain America, was unable to withstand it. Chapter 350, 3 American Captains, 3 Standpoints. No, there, with a bang, the flaming chain slammed down, sending the armor flying backwards, breaking a street-side fire hydrant and sending a jet of water gushing out. Far away in his Hawaiian villa, Tony Stark, watching the live broadcast, sighed, "That's a real slam. It hurts just looking at it." While Tony from 2023 had appeared polite before him, how could he, Tony Stark himself, not sense the arrogance hidden within? He acted like a man who'd been there before, someone who understood the future, but now he knows the cruelty of this world, right? You should experience the pain I've endured these past few years, Tony from 2011 chuckled unkindly. That's just the beginning. Once you've experienced the hardships of this world, you'll know who is the strongest Tony Stark in the multiverse. How can you Tony Starks, who've had it easy and only managed to take down a few gang leaders, compare to me? I'm saving the troubled America. Tony from 2023 was sent flying, and his partner, Steve Rogers, was in much worse shape. Unshielded, he was pierced by the swords of the elder brothers, who had pierced him with bloody wounds. Just as the real captain was at a disadvantage 3 years ago when he first faced SHIELD Swordsman Brigade, Steve from the Prime Universe was equally overwhelmed, and even more so, because the elder brothers were now far more powerful than they were 3 years ago. Where on earth did all these powerful beings emerge from this universe? Steve from 2023 was puzzled. Before learning about Kamartaj, he had never heard of a method for mass-producing transcendence. Taking advantage of his distraction, Matt Murdock swung his short club, striking him in the knee, causing him to stagger. The elder brother seized the opportunity and stabbed him in the shoulders. The blades penetrated his shoulder blades, pinning him to the platform. The decision on how to deal with this man naturally rested with Captain Steve. Knocked back, Tony soared into the air, dodging the approaching Johnny Blaze. Seeing his companion subdued, he immediately raised his right hand and unleashed a blast wave at the two eunuchs on the dais. The real captain, who had been watching his teammates' attacks, immediately raised a green magical shield to block the attack. "Stop," the real captain urged Steve from 2023. "Your power can't stop me from doing what's right, no way. I can't watch America being destroyed by you." Steve was resolute, not only because his beloved America would be impacted, but also because this impact came from another version of himself. This was unbearable for the righteous man, a denial of himself. Well said. A spaceship suddenly appeared in the sky, and a group of people jumped out of the hatch. It was Phil Coulson and his teammates. "Coulson, you're still alive." Steve from 2023 looked surprised, then realized, "I forgot. The Charities here aren't here. Looks like my other universe self is in trouble." Coulson was startled, but he didn't take it too seriously. Instead, he laughed. "I hope my other universe self sacrifices for America." Several eunuchs Coulson brought with him quickly engaged the eunuchs from the real Captain America's side. Swords flashed, and the sound of blades piercing the air filled the air. He and Melinda May assisted Steve from 2023 in the battle against Matt Murdock, while Tony held off Johnny Blaze from a distance, exploiting his inability to fly and attacking from afar. With reinforcements arriving, the situation remained stalemated, with the real Captain America holding back. Phil Coulson wasn't the only one arriving in New York. With the American Consortium's leaders concluding their alliance, the Masters, having reached a consensus, decided to mobilize all their Iron Man armor and extraordinary figures to defeat this rebellious fake Captain America. Civil War, aliens, and the like were merely minor issues. The real threat lay with Steve Rogers, the man attempting to overthrow them and usurp power through the ranks of the peasantry. Even a random ordinary person would be enough to evoke their fear of the Red Phantom, let alone this guy who was most likely Captain America. The Iron Man suits stationed in counties near New York to protect the powerful took off and immediately headed for New York. Ever since Tony Stark of this universe shared the armor technology with the American military, the elite naturally acquired it, and anyone of note possessed one or two Iron Man suits as bodyguards. The heavy casualties were incurred by both sides of the Civil War. Small and medium-sized corporations, which hadn't participated in the conflict and instead sat on the sidelines, still possessed scattered armor models. While the individual numbers were small, the sheer volume was significant. With each upgrade, were the obsolete armors recycled? Just kidding. How could they possibly scrap such expensive equipment? These outdated models, replaced by newer models, had all been bought up by small and medium-sized corporations and wealthy families. Some of the younger second and third generation even used these armors as showpieces. Now, driven by the need for justice, and knowing the horrors of the Red Spectre, all capitalists have pledged their war suits to support New York. These spectators, who had sat back and watched the fight without a single blow during the macro rampage, are now restless. Suddenly, countless jets of fire filled the American sky, like a meteor shower, converging on New York from all directions. As the real Captain locked horns with Steve and Tony from 2023 and Coulson from this universe, the first arriving Iron Man suit spotted the fake Captain's location and descended from the sky, landing beside him. "Captain, we've been ordered by the state governments to assist you in eliminating these shameless villains intent on subverting America." Suddenly, the Iron Man suits descended, surrounding the fake Captain like a galaxy of stars. "Ha ha ha," the fake Captain laughed heartily, looking down at the real Captain on the stage and boasting, "See? I'm the real Captain America, don't you understand? America belongs to the elite, not the poor." Captain America was naturally a representative of the vested interests, otherwise, they could always find another spiritual symbol. You're wrong, the real captain on the stage declared. America belongs to all its citizens, not just a few powerful figures. Justice in America belongs to all its citizens. Steve from 2023 frowned deeply upon seeing this. He disagreed with the real captain's violent reformist approach, but his lingering compassion prevented him from ignoring the feelings of the poor. If he had to choose sides, he'd choose the middle. And so, before the eyes of the American people, and indeed the world, 3 Captain Americas, each with their own distinct views, suddenly appeared in New York City, facing off on opposite sides. The sheer spectacle was so intense that it almost overlooked the 2 Makrats still wreaking havoc on New York City in the sky. In reality, these American heroes were now so preoccupied with their own positions that they had completely forgotten the alien monsters slaughtering New Yorkers. At this moment, New York City seemed to be torn apart. One part was filled with screams and explosions, while the other was immersed in a tense confrontation. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.